Good morning to you, and thank you so much for waking up with us here on Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine. It's Tuesday morning, April 9th. I hope you all had a wonderful eclipse day on yesterday. We have a lot of top stories and headlines to share with you this morning, so let's go ahead and get started. Taking you out now to get a live look out in Gaza now at 5:57 on the East Coast. As we're covering top stories and headlines this morning, you all know the Israel-Hamas War is one of those top stories. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has escalated his pledge to invade the southern Gaza city of Rafah, which of course is filled with around 1.4 million Palestinians, most of whom are displaced from other parts of the Gaza Strip. And speaking of this, all of this is going on with a looming humanitarian crisis and concerns of a regional conflict. Some say that regional conflict is already underway. Of course, we'll have more details on this story later on this morning. Another top story we are following this morning takes us out to Michigan as it relates to the parents of a Michigan school shooter who are asking a judge to keep them out of prison as they face sentencing for their role in an attack that killed 4 students back in 2021. I'm talking about James and Jennifer Crumbley, there they are on your screen now, who are scheduled to appear in court today for the close of a pioneering case. They are the first parents convicted in a U.S. mass school shooting. We'll be checking in with our content partners over at Fox 2 Detroit this morning, getting the very latest on this story. Transitioning now to another top story we are following here on Live Now from Fox, giving you a live look at our XRAD system. Weather a top story as well this morning. You can see several storm systems brewing there in the south. Now at 6 o'clock on the East Coast, several states being impacted. You can see Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi, Georgia, and it looks like it's starting to head over to Florida as well. But first, the top story I want to get to you all, as I mentioned, it is the day after Eclipse Day. After months of anticipation, we know many of you all got out yesterday to see something that you don't get to see every day. We know the total eclipse finally graced cities across the U.S. from Texas all the way to Maine. Fox News correspondent Connor Hansen joins us now. He was in the path of totality in Buffalo, New York, sharing more on yesterday's total solar eclipse. Let's take a listen.
Cities across the U.S. were packed with millions of sky gazers in the path of totality. Now people are heading home after an experience they'll never forget.
It's an amazing experience, and I'm glad that my friends and I decided to come out today. Like, you feel like an invigoration or something. It's weird. Like you can't put your finger on it.
The total eclipse darkening skies across America for up to 4 minutes at a time. Cameras using special filters to capture incredible footage of the sun blazing behind the moon's path.
Diamond ring!
And cloudy weather reports in upstate New York didn't stop hundreds of thousands from gathering in cities like Buffalo and Rochester.
We've been waiting for this moment for a very long time, so we're excited. A little sad because of the clouds.
Yeah.
Vermont and Maine saw the final glimpses of the total eclipse.
This is pretty special. Probably the only time I'll get a chance.
The next one in North America won't come until 2044.
Because I'm 92. The next will be 20 years. So it's definitely my last one, I hope.
Aside from the spectacle here on the ground, NASA also funding projects studying the sun's impact on Earth. In Buffalo, New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thank you so much for that detailed report. And as we are recapping America's total solar eclipse, we're going to check in now with our content partners over at Fox Weather as they have more details on yesterday's historical event. They'll also be giving an update. You can see in that watch box those severe storms they are tracking. Let's listen in.
Size hail, but there were some reports, Michael, that came in 2 to 3 inches.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, really, North Texas got lit up, and unfortunately, the risk of severe weather is actually increasing over the next couple days. You got to stay with us this morning. We got the details coming up next. This does sort of take us back to what happened over this past weekend. You've probably seen a lot of this imagery on social media already, but look at Tulsa, Oklahoma on Saturday. There's something so vivid and majestic about lightning at dusk and nighttime.
Look at the sky, almost looks red.
And the city lights, you know, part of that factor as well. But I mean,
kind of beautiful though,
I'll never
too.
get sick of lightning video.
No, I'm right there with you. But it's beautiful, but it's almost eerily beautiful.
Yes, there's always like terror and beauty with natural conditions. It's always kind of back to back. Well, let's get back to what happened yesterday with the solar eclipse. After a very exciting day yesterday, yes, Texas skies, they went dark during the solar eclipse. That's a live look at Dallas, by the way, and then you got Austin on the right. These folks have a very big risk of severe weather today and also tomorrow.
Yeah, thankfully, though, at least they were able to catch the solar eclipse before that severe weather moved in. And again, we have multiple rounds moving in later on. Fox Weather's Stephen Morgan live in Dallas. And Stephen, first and foremost, you know, how'd you enjoy the eclipse? And then, of course, there's a big severe weather threat, though, that's looming for you, too.
Yeah, Michael, Britta, good morning to you. It was phenomenal. I mean, what a place to be, to see those clouds break free and for us to get in on the eclipse. We'll talk more about that coming up at the bottom of the hour. The looming threats that we have, you know, really started as the eclipse wrapped up. Clouds, the skies were blue in Dallas. There were storms that were beginning to bubble up from South Texas. It wasn't the case like what we saw with the eclipse in Dallas. Farther south along I-35, I-45. Houston, for example, wasn't in the path of totality, but Houston had clouds. They had storms moving on through. And then those skies opened up overnight in Dallas. Heavy rain, strong winds, reports of ping pong ball sized hail with a couple of these bigger storms. And I'm talking about what was moving through very close to Dallas, just east in Mesquite. Those storms have already moved out. Overnight, the rain continued, and we're waking up to some wet pavement this morning, but we have a bit of a break. Atmosphere is going to recharge some, though, as we head into the afternoon and the evening. And as you guys said, we've got the potential to see some significant severe weather. Main parameters, the modes that we're looking at today, will be the possibility of tornadoes and then large hail yet again. That large hail, an indication of those strong winds, those vertical winds that will be able to support the hailstones. The tornado threat, that's probably of biggest concern because not only could they be a bit on the stronger side, but they could be persisting into the evening. We're looking at the different threats that we have. Those threats extend along the Texas-Louisiana border, pushing off into the east. And then we have by Wednesday a growing threat for perhaps a severe weather outbreak through the central Gulf Coast. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, all at play. Later today, though, a lot of the focus will be here in the state of Texas. Dallas, when we look at where Dallas sits and North Texas, on the fringe, perhaps the majority of the severe weather will be a little farther to the south of Dallas, but we could still see some storms work on through. Keep in mind, we're starting Tuesday. We're starting this morning with some rain stabilized air. We had a few thunder boomers this morning waking me up a bit early. Quite a bit of lightning associated with them too, and temperatures have cooled down just a bit. I mean, we have that rain cooled air, but we are going to be in that zone again today where storms will be moving on through. The other component that we need to watch for will be the persistence of the rain. With so much rain that we saw yesterday, several flash flood warnings already in effect this morning, the majority of them in Louisiana, but it's this zone which has seen so much rain, and those threats are going to linger into Wednesday, even Thursday. This is a setup that looks like spring, and it's one that we just have to get used to, because as we even persist into next week, it looks as if those threats are going to continue. So Britta and Michael, it does appear that spring is settling in, even though temperatures might be a bit more reflective as we head toward the weekend of summer. It's going to get warm.
Yes. I mean, Stephen, just looking at how this is all setting up, and I'm sure you're having the same thoughts since both you and I spent so much time in Southeast Texas forecasting. You know, Houston could be really in a tough spot later tonight through tomorrow morning. It's one of those setups that you kind of got to wait until you're in game time mode, because sometimes it falls apart before it gets down south. But sometimes it holds together, and unfortunately, it looks like that energy might hold together in the overnight hours, and we might be waking up to, you know, the north suburbs of Houston being rocked, the north counties as well. I think about Walker County and Montgomery County. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. But Stephen, thanks for the update out of Dallas. Always good to see you. And look out for those storms later today.
Sure thing. See you guys in a little bit.
See you in a little bit. You know, Stephen said, the threat doesn't go away. So we're just going to continue to look at the threat as it continues to march on, because I mean, Michael, right now we're in that recharge moment, as Stephen said. So we had the action yesterday. Although we had thunderstorms this morning, they are sub-severe, meaning that they're below severe limits.
Right.
Once we recharge this afternoon, then it's kind of go time, and we stay in alert mode like all the way through Wednesday evening.
That's exactly it. It is going to be not only on Wednesday, but also into Thursday, and you can see what the multi-day severe weather outlook looks like. I want to make sure that we focus in on your day tomorrow on Wednesday, because you'll notice that highlighted area in pink. We consider that a 4 out of 5 risk and or a significant risk. As we mentioned, there's going to be a lot of Gulf of Mexico moisture that is going to be pulled into the system. Why is that important? Because I want you to think about that moisture almost like gasoline, right? It is fuel for the fire. We're expecting to see, perhaps as Stephen Morgan mentioned, a severe weather outbreak with multiple, not only tornado warnings possible, but perhaps even severe thunderstorm warnings ongoing, with long-tracked tornadoes possible out of this as well. EF2 to perhaps even EF3 in intensity. Those, by the way, just so you know, are winds upwards of 165 miles per hour on a high-end EF3 tornado. And look at where it's bullseyed there, toward places like Jackson, Mississippi, right, just north of New Orleans. You think about Shreveport area, well to your south and east, but Baton Rouge, the capital city, something to watch out for. And Britta, you can see it right there, right along some of those major thoroughfares, I-55.
I mean, it pretty much extends down to the I-10 corridor.
And this could be a nocturnal event, too. That's the other thing.
Yes.
This could be like an early morning sort of situation.
Yeah, you know, the complex of storms that will develop later today in Texas, that will be, you know, the focus point, because that's what's going to continue to work its way, you know, down into southeast Texas tomorrow, and then eventually into Louisiana after daybreak. The thing that does help us out is that the threat for tomorrow is during the day. Yes, we have the overnight threat tonight, and that's going to be for southeast Texas, but for Louisiana and also for Mississippi, where we have a highlighted risk of tornadoes, the time frame is going to be when we have daylight on our side. So at least we have that working for this small portion. But the problem is tomorrow, this is a more mature system. You were talking about the moisture levels there, Michael, but also, you know, the system is becoming occluded. It's just a fancy term for showing you that we got a purple line up on the board. All that it means is that it's a mature system. And just think about having a mature adult. It means that there's more punch behind the punch. So, you know, tomorrow, all the factors in the atmosphere are a bigger deal. There's a look at the timeline. So again, the overnight threat tonight is something to really keep in mind for Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. The daylight hours are the time to focus on. But then, Michael, you were talking about how this moves into Alabama and Georgia. That does go into the overnight time frame. The fact that once we go to this afternoon, we are in go mode all the way through Thursday morning.
Absolutely. As you mentioned too earlier on Fox Weather First, like, you really need to make sure that you have multiple ways of receiving invasive warnings in the event of, again, a severe thunderstorm watch or warning being issued. I love what you said about if you have a small child, that you want to make sure to have that, you know, car seat in these tornado-safe
If you
shelter.
have a baby, I always say put that pod car seat in your safe spot.
I never thought about that. And when you said that, I was like, you know what? That's a fantastic idea.
It's a great way to protect their body and a great way to know exactly where they're at. You just need to put a towel or a blanket over the top of it if you do get impacted by a tornado, just to, you know, protect them from debris. It's a scary thing to think about, but these are all things that if you think about and talk about it, then it's not as scary as you get into the situation itself. In addition to the risk that we have for severe weather, Stephen Morgan kind of highlighted this as well, is the amount of rain that we're going to be working with. It's also a concern. I mean, oh my goodness, this region, if you go back to January 1, we have some spots that have already picked up 2 feet of rain. It's the beginning of April. Gosh, we still have another 8 months of the year to get through, and we're running 2 feet above where we should be for parts of northwest Mississippi. So the fact that we got a widespread 3 to 5 inches of rain in orange for Arkansas, western Mississippi, Louisiana, that is going to add to the flood concern. And this is not just lowland flooding. This is also, you know, our rivers and creeks. We got a lot working through the system already, and this is right over the Mississippi River. You know, Michael, I think back to the, you know, it was less than a year ago that we were talking about dramatically low levels in the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
Isn't it wild to think how much the pendulum has swung, right?
You know, it's what a difference just a couple of months make, because you look at places even like Dallas, Fort Worth. I was checking in on their climatology. They are now 2 inches up and over where they should be for this time of the year. So they're 2 inches in surplus, and you can see what happens when the ground is already super saturated over places like Texarkana, just northeast of Houston, Alexandria. More water on top of already saturated ground leads to runoff and leads to flooding.
Yes, and that highlighted very likely area, that's a 3 out of 4 heads up for flash flooding for today and tomorrow. That also coincides with our tornado risk. So these tornado warnings, it's always a struggle to have a visual sight line in the state of Louisiana and Mississippi with tornadoes anyways, because of the trees and the rolling hills. You throw on heavy rain, you're not going to see this coming at you. You're going to hear the railroad tracks and then realize that a tornado smacked you. So, you know, it all wraps up into the same threat that you got to be really on top of conditions over the next couple days here. Well, coming up next, what happens when all this moves to the East Coast? Well, you guessed it. It means that we have rain for the East Coast, but we get a lucky draw, Michael, before we get to all that hot mess. So we'll give you the details on the hot mess, but more importantly, we're going to give you the critical information so you can save the day today, because it's going to be awesome. Stay with us here on Fox Weather First.
And we appreciate our content partners over at Fox Weather as they work to keep us weather ready. Those storm systems brewing this morning, and as they just mentioned, going well into Thursday. Don't forget, for your latest weather-related headlines, just search Watch Fox Weather on any web browser. The time now 6:13 on the East Coast. I want to give you a live look out in Gaza. This is where we'll be headed after our first 2-minute commercial break of the hour, getting into the very latest of the Israel-Hamas war. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, and good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Jeanne Francine, giving you a live look now out in Gaza as we turn our attention to the very latest of the Israel-Hamas war. We know there's been speculation about the true meaning of recent Israeli troop movements in Gaza. All of this as a Hamas official says no progress has been made in a new round of ceasefire talks in Egypt. Fox News correspondent Trey Yinks joins us now with more on this story from Tel Aviv.
This victory requires entering Rafah and eliminating the terrorist battalions there. This will happen. There is a date.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laying out clear indications that his troops will enter Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah. The comments come after a surprise move over the weekend, with Israel withdrawing nearly all its forces from Gaza, leaving just one brigade with a few thousand soldiers behind. But Israeli officials say the tactical decision is not an indication the war against Hamas is over, rather a recalibration amid emerging regional threats.
I presume this is a tactical decision by the IDF and Israeli leadership in the face of a threat of a real attack from the north, from Hezbollah, or a direct attack from Iran.
As fighting grinds to a halt on Israel's southern front, negotiators met Monday in Cairo, Egypt, to hammer out the details of a ceasefire proposal. Teams from Israel, the United States, and Hamas all vying for an agreement that could end the conflict, unlike past negotiations that aimed for a temporary pause. Hamas claims no progress was made in the talks, but the meetings are seen as a last-ditch effort to avert an Israeli operation into Rafah and rescue the remaining hostages. With ongoing ceasefire talks about Gaza, Israeli forces now look north to Lebanon, where this morning a Hezbollah field commander was killed in an Israeli airstrike.
This is not routine. We are in a multi-arena war. There is no reason for panic, but also no place for complacency. We must be aware of the situation and always prepared.
Israel is now faced with a multi-front conflict that could escalate further if Iran gets directly involved. In Tel Aviv, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Trey, thank you so much for that report. Joining us live now to further explain this conflict is senior lecturer in Homeland Security and Criminal Justice at the University of New Haven, Mr. Ken Gray. Thank you so much for waking up with us here on Live Now from Fox, Mr. Ken.
Good morning, Janae. Glad to be with you.
Good morning to you. So many moving parts with these latest developments. I want to start with the ceasefire talks out in Egypt. Hamas officials telling us that there are no signs of progress as we look forward to a ceasefire.
Yeah, the United States over the weekend was pushing the idea of the Israelis increasing the number of Palestinian prisoners to be released in exchange for the hostages. And they were also looking for the ability of Palestinians to return back to both Khan Yunis and up to Gaza City that had been evacuated before the IDF moved into those areas. But so far that has not been successful in pushing forward this ceasefire agreement. And so that currently stands stalled at the moment.
And as we talk about that ceasefire agreement being stalled, I want to now switch gears and point out Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that he plans to escalate his plans to go out to invade the southern Gaza city of Rafah, despite warnings from the U.S. What could this mean as this war rages on?
Well, as we've seen over the last couple of days and last couple of weeks, the United States and Israel have been separating in their views of how to conduct this war. President Biden has, on a couple of occasions, actually used harsh words to describe the situation there in the Gaza Strip. And the Prime Minister Netanyahu says that they are willing to go it alone and that they intend to take actions to rid Israel of the threat of Hamas. And the only way to do that is to enter Rafah. And so they are making their plans towards doing that. And the Prime Minister said that they have a date set for that invasion. In the meantime, IDF forces that are in the Gaza Strip, many of them have been pulled out of the Gaza Strip. And that may be to address external threats from some of the Iran proxies in the area, or it may also to be able to give them a rest before they get involved in the final push here into Rafah.
As we speak about other threats, I'm so glad you brought that up. Many of the viewers and myself keeping a close eye on those talks of American U.S. troops potentially being in danger. We've seen what's happening in Damascus, Syria, areas of that region. And we saw what happened months ago, that unfortunate news when those American soldiers from Georgia were killed, and concerns that that could potentially happen again during this conflict.
Sure. Iran has promised to respond to Israel's bombing of their embassy there in Damascus. How they're going to do it and when they're going to do it is unknown. However, it's more likely than not that Iran, instead of becoming directly involved themselves, will use their proxies in the area. So their proxies include militias through Syria and Iraq. The Hezbollah is their main allies there, their main proxy in the region, and the Houthis, as well as Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. Consequently, these are all the threats that are expected to actually take part in this attack against Israel and potentially against U.S. troops in the area. We have troops that are deployed in both Syria and in Iraq, and also being held in reserve in bases in Jordan. So they are all at risk of potentially being attacked by these proxies. In response to the attacks by Israel against the Damascus embassy, Iran has promised something. We just don't know what it's going to be yet. It could be even something in another country, perhaps even here in the United States.
And as you say that, it just terrifies me, because we've seen what happens with terrorist attacks. Many people thinking back to what happened on that tragic day on 9/11. I want to ask you, you know, as we were talking about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pretty much saying that they will continue to fight out in Gaza despite those U.S. warnings, though. I want to ask you, what could that mean for U.S.-Israel relations? Because we know that the U.S. is an ally to Israel, but when you have a government and entities telling you and encouraging you not to do something, and you go ahead and do it anyway, and it could potentially put us in harm's way, what could that mean for that relationship?
So the United States is supplying weapon systems to Israel, and as a result of this breaking down and the backing of Israel, we may stop providing weapon systems to them to fight this war. That's one possibility. The other thing is that the United States has already shown that it is willing to back away from supporting Israel when that vote went before the Security Council and the United States abstained from voting, and then there was a 14-0 vote in the UN Security Council to call for an immediate ceasefire. That shows that the United States is willing to play hardball with Israel by possibly withholding weapon systems, not backing them in the UN. And so we will see if this continues to separate or if the United States continues to back Israel in their plans. But the entrance into Rafah will be a huge point. If Israel is able to pull this off, they have the possibility of actually ridding the area of Hamas. But at the same time, the death toll should be very high, because there are a lot of Palestinians that are huddled together there at the southern end of the Gaza Strip, right up against the fence into Egypt, that are in the way of a battle with Hamas. This is not going to be a set piece out on the battlefield. This is going to be door-to-door type fighting. And those doors are also occupied by a lot of non-combatants that might end up being collateral damage.
Absolutely. And we've seen, Mr. Ken, so many power players in this conflict. I mean, right now, the International Court of Justice holding those two-day hearings as it relates to the Israel-Hamas war. Now, Nicaragua accusing Germany of war crimes, saying that Germany was supplying Israel with weapons and supplies and support. So just seeing how, I know you've talked about that phrase regional conflict, and we're seeing it span out more and more and more. And I think it's just further implying and showing that this is turning into just that.
Yes. So there's, from the very beginning, there was always a risk that this could turn into a regional conflict. With the actions there with Israel against Iran at their embassy, that has the real potential of actually turning this into a full regional conflict. All the proxies are still very busy, but Iran has been encouraging them to launch simultaneous missile and drone attacks against Israel. And so Israel may be about to have to withstand the brunt of all the forces of the proxies in the area. And that may be part of the reason why the IDF troops were pulled out of Gaza Strip, not just to give them a chance to rest before the final push there, but also to be willing to be able to withstand any type of attack by the proxies in the area.
Well, Mr. Ken, you know we thoroughly appreciate your dialogue and expertise on these international conflicts. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I let you go?
So there's been this call by the Palestinians to have their petition addressed by the UN to become a full member. That has been passed over to the Committee of Admission of new members. And if the Palestinians were to achieve this, if they were to achieve becoming a full state, recognized as a full state within the UN, then that gives them real leverage there in the UN to fight against the Israeli occupation of the Gaza Strip. So that is something that will be taken up during the month of April. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Again, the United States, which normally would have Israel's back, may not have its back in this case.
We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that. Mr. Ken, thank you again for waking up with us here on Live Now from Fox. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
And speaking of the very latest of the International Court of Justice, as Mr. Ken and I spoke about in that interview, right now giving you a live look out in The Hague, Netherlands, as the UN's top court continues 2 days of preliminary hearings in that case brought by Nicaragua, accusing Germany of breaching the Genocide Convention by providing arms and support to Israel. This is now a factor as we continue to discuss this looming Israel-Hamas war. Now into over 6 months of fighting. We're going to go ahead and go to our second 2-minute commercial break now at 6:29 on the East Coast. And when we come back, getting more into this 2-day hearing out in The Hague, Netherlands as it relates to the Israel-Hamas war. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, now at 6:31 on the East Coast. Good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, it's Tuesday morning, April 9th, giving you a live look there out at The Hague, Netherlands. That's the hallway of the International Court of Justice. And we know that inside the chambers, a very compelling hearing underway as we continue to talk about the Israel-Hamas war. You can see a speaker there as the UN's top court continues 2 days of preliminary hearings in a case brought by Nicaragua accusing Germany of breaching the Genocide Convention by providing arms and support to Israel amid this Israel-Hamas war. Let's listen into the comments, and I'll pop up a quick briefing on the left side of your screen of other top stories we're following this morning right here on Live Now from Fox.
Hide their terrorist activities. Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock fully recognized this dilemma in the UN Security Council on 24th October 2023, when she pointed out that Hamas is playing with human suffering and that the fight is against Hamas and not against civilians. Therefore, she has insisted that Israel, in defending itself, must do its utmost to protect civilian lives and thus respect the limits of self-defense and international humanitarian law at all times. The other point I need to emphasize at the outset is Germany has always been a strong supporter of the rights of the Palestinian people. This is, alongside Israel's security, the second principle that has guided Germany's response to the Middle East conflict in general and to its current escalation in particular. Germany remains committed to a two-state solution as the only path towards a lasting peace in the Middle East. Germany has provided significant support to Palestinians living in the occupied Palestinian territories for decades. To date, Germany has bilaterally supported the economic and social development of the occupied Palestinian territories and administrative capacity building with a total of 1.5 billion euro. Germany recognizes the right of Palestinians to self-determination to be exercised in the territories that came under occupation in 1967. It has firmly condemned attempts to undermine this two-state solution, such as through the expansion of illegal settlements.
So just playing out a brief comment there from the proceedings this morning over at the International Court of Justice. But right now, happening live, this same speaker speaking to the media about basically a recap of what she said inside. There she is right there with other people there at the International Court of Justice. Let's listen in live.
There is no reason for the ICJ to adopt provisional measures. We are fully aware of our responsibilities under the Genocide Convention and international humanitarian law, and we respect these. Mal in Deutsch. Deutschland und die internationale Staatengemeinschaft stehen angesichts der katastrophalen humanitären Lage in Gaza und der fortdauernden terroristischen Attacken der Hamas auf Israel vor großen moralischen, politischen und rechtlichen Herausforderungen. Deutschland hat heute vor dem IGH dargelegt, dass wir uns im Rahmen des Völkerrechts tagtäglich aufs Neue dafür einsetzen, dabei die richtige Balance zu finden. Anders als Nicaragua sind wir bemüht, beiden Seiten des Konflikts gerecht zu werden. Uns leiten Respekt für das Völkerrecht, die Verantwortung für die Sicherheit Israels, Unterstützung für die leidende Zivilbevölkerung in Gaza und die Bemühungen um eine Freilassung der israelischen Geiseln, sowie das legitime Selbstbestimmungsrecht der Palästinenser im Rahmen einer Zwei-Staaten-Lösung. Wir haben heute dargelegt, dass wir die unbegründeten, haltlosen Anschuldigungen Nicaraguas zurückweisen und dass kein Anlass für den IGH besteht, einstweilige Anordnungen zu erlassen. Wir sind uns unseren Verpflichtungen aus der Völkermordkonvention und aus dem humanitären Völkerrecht voll bewusst, und wir werden ihnen gerecht. Vielen Dank.
Madam, Steph Parker from Al Jazeera English. You said
I'm not answering any
You're not answering any questions
our plaidoyer stands for itself today in court. Thank you very much.
Well, we have a press conference.
No, we don't have a press conference. I have a doorstep.
So brief comments there from Germany as they are accused of providing arms and support to Israel amid the war. And then on the left side of your screen, other top stories we're following this morning as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to begin that Rafah invasion despite warnings from allies, including the U.S. We're also following severe weather that spawned tornadoes across Texas. And then looking ahead to the 11 o'clock hour East Coast time coming up at 11:35 this morning Eastern time. We'll get an update on that Baltimore bridge collapse. The time now 6:37 on the East Coast. Let's go ahead and go to our third 2-minute commercial break of the hour. And when we come back, getting more from the International Court of Justice. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. Heading back inside the International Court of Justice as Germany is accused of providing arms and support to Israel amid the Israel-Hamas War. Nicaragua accusing Germany of these things. And right now, the representative of Nicaragua is speaking right now. Let's listen in.
Sold by Israel to Germany in military equipment. So, I mean, we're not talking about just small amounts. But the fact is that here is not the moment to go into that. Now, the other main point, which of course legally is at the heart of this of all this issue, is obviously Israel is responsible for what is happening. But what is the responsibility of third states? The responsibility of Nicaragua, the responsibility of Germany, of all states. Well, just to begin by the Genocide Convention. The Genocide Convention says that there's an obligation to prevent genocide and punish it. How do you prevent it if you have to wait until somebody declares a genocide has occurred? It would be irrelevant and ridiculous if we have to wait for that to occur. So the position of Germany here is saying, no, we can't take any decision because Israel isn't here. What is happening is public. It's public knowledge. They didn't go into one of the statements I made yesterday. Precisely, I mentioned that the first case of this court was a case involving the mining of the waters in Albania after the Second World War. They were mined by Yugoslavia, not by Albania. The court even sent investigators. They determined that Albania didn't mine the waters. It was a third party. So Albania wasn't responsible for the mines there. But Albania was independently responsible because they had the obligation to warn everybody that the waters were mined. In this case, the actions are being committed by Israel but they are public. We know about it. It is absolutely impossible to say that we are not aware of what is happening, and we have the obligation to prevent it. If that obligation exists, then here we are. Now, on the other questions, I mean, that's legally, yes, I mean, much was made also of that a dispute has not been established. I mean, supposedly, even I'm not even going to go into the merits of that. I simply mentioned yesterday that if you wait, in a case of genocide, in this type of case, if you wait into an interchange, an indefinite interchange to establish that a dispute exists, then what's the reason, I mean, of the urgency of what's happening? I mean, we sent a note. Whatever the reaction of Germany, Germany has made public statements. And what is a dispute? Obviously, a dispute exists. All these are just legal technicalities. We hope, we have confidence that the court will cut through all these legalisms and go directly to the heart of the matter. And I think it's an important international obligation that is here at stake, obviously for Germany, which is here in the court, but for everybody in the world. I mean, we are acting on an obligation that exists for all the international community. So we have full confidence that the court will proceed on that basis. Now, if you have a... Pardon?
Can I ask you a quick question about Germany said in its statement that we are a peaceful, democratic country. We are never, of course, violating international laws. What is your response to that?
Well, anybody can say anything, but the facts are the ones that speak. In this case, I mean, if you are arming Israel, if you are backing Israel, I mean, how much more backing can there possibly be that South Africa presented against Israel at the end of last year, 26th December, and in the first days of January, Germany was saying, we're going to intervene in that case in favor of Israel, without even knowing everything, denying that anything happened. So I mean, that's just simply on a political level, obviously. And in fact, I should mention that that reaction of Germany was one of the reasons why Nicaragua immediately intervened in the South Africa-Israel case, because we thought it was necessary to do that. But as I say, I mean, you can say anything you want, but we are talking here not about statements, but about facts. And the facts are that Germany continues to be having military interchanges with Israel, apart from all other situations.
What do you make of the argument by Germany that it's providing military equipment, not weapons of war or war weapons, that the majority of the exports, the overwhelming majority of exports, is general military equipment that it cannot be used in war conflicts?
Well, frankly, as I say, this is something that we have to go in a more when the proof is going to be analyzed, which is in the merit phase. Here we can only go very summarily. I mean, any statement can say, oh, we are only providing for military training. I mean, how do you distinguish that? I mean, yes, to say, yes, we are providing some equipment, but do we have to prove at this phase that this bullet that was sent by Germany killed this Palestinian, or this bomb was dropped there? I mean, if this bomb was sent to Germany and this bullet was sent to Germany, by Germany to Israel, and it's part of the stock of Israel, that's it. Huh? From our point of view, I mean, whether they're saying that they are only sending training or doing, I mean, the amounts of assistance being given is not for training. And how do you distinguish saying that 500,000 rounds of munition were sent, but they were only munition for training? I mean that you can say anything you want. But basically what I want to emphasize is that we have not reached a phase where we can respond directly. In fact, by the procedure adopted by the court, you can see, for example, and I mentioned it yesterday also, that we presented our application, some 50, 60 pages of arguments and things. Germany has not said anything. We had presented our argument yesterday. Germany has not said anything until today. And today we have no opportunity of saying anything, of reacting, analyzing what they said. in responding directly. But I mean, it's not going to be that Nicaragua is defenseless in the sense that many of these issues are not really issues that should be before the court at this moment. Because, let's say, the amount of aid is something that we have to analyze later. The fact is that aid exists, and that's the basic, that's the prima facie thing that is before the court at this moment.
Germany says that they give to Israel is like to defend Israel themselves. But who can guarantee that it's not going to be used to attack the civilian Palestine?
No, exactly. I mean, it's only. I mean, there's absolutely no guarantee. I mean, one of the second petitions we have for the court was that Germany also make sure that any weapons that have already been given, German weapons, or from German companies that have been given to Israel, are not used for that purpose. And then here we saw one of our colleagues from Germany making fun of that, saying, well, Germany should, it's what it's going to do, use its influence on Israel to make sure that it's not. No, but we're talking also on contracts. Normally, when you have a contract and you're selling or you're authorizing, I mean, that gives you a certain authority on what's going to happen. So, I mean, there are things that can be done. That's why we're asking the court on all different levels that Germany should do everything really possible to try to prevent genocide and to try to prevent what is happening there. I think it's not only a legal, obvious, and moral obligation, but it's not something that we can just say, no, it's irrelevant.
Germany says that you didn't follow the procedure and have hastened to this case by not giving Germany the chance to enter into dialogue before coming to court here. What do you say to that?
Well, we sent a note. They say they did not receive it. I find it very... But irrespective of that, the reason that the legal argument they have is that a dispute should have been established firmly. Now, obviously, if you look at it from a serious point of view, I mean, nobody can doubt that there's a dispute. It's not only because we are now before the court, but if you had asked 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, or 2 months ago, there's obviously, Germany has one position and Nicaragua has another position. So there is a dispute. That isn't a real, for me, it's not a real argument. Let's go to practical, and that's the way the court has to see this type of things. Oh, there's not, a dispute has not been established. Okay, let's begin again, because now a dispute has been established. I don't see any reason to even doubt that there was a dispute. Not only, a dispute is not only because you're having to change directly communications, but also public communications. Germany is making its position absolutely clear from the beginning that they are backing and with whatever Israel is doing. Nicaragua has its position, which is completely different. We think that's a violation of international law. So, I mean, there's obviously a dispute. The rest is just trying to pick formalities or whatever. And another point, which I also mentioned yesterday, and I can repeat now, is that if we're talking about situations as drastic and as violent and occurring so quickly, I mean, Gaza has been devastated in a few months. It's like an atomic bomb, a nuclear bomb has destroyed everything. Are we going to wait until, well, we send a note to Germany, they sent a note back to us, then we have to send another one? I mean, in this type of situations, I mean, you can't be waiting to establish as if you were discussing anything diplomatic that could be waiting and waiting and waiting. So frankly, for us, that's not a fundamental argument. I mean, it doesn't go to the real basis. Whether it, as I say, supposedly, if that were true, what could be the worst that could happen? Okay, we have to begin again, because now obviously there's a dispute. So I mean, that doesn't really go to the heart of what we're discussing. I mean, naturally, our colleagues, and I'm a lawyer also, if I was on the other side, well, I mean, you have to use all the arguments, but that's not a real, at least I don't feel that should be. Occasionally it can be an escape clause for a tribunal that doesn't want to hear a case, try to get rid of it that way. But I think this is a very serious case. There are too many important things, very vital things involved. And we have to take it, not go into formalities, but to take it very seriously. Many important things are happening. And international, important, very important and vital international obligations, not only for Germany, but for all countries in the world, are at stake here. Okay, well, thank you very much.
The representative of Nicaragua wrapping up his comments there to the media as the UN's top court continues 2 days of preliminary hearings there at the ICJ in a case brought forward by Nicaragua. Nicaragua accusing Germany of breaching the Genocide Convention by providing arms and support to Israel amid the Israel-Hamas War. On the left side of your screen, top stories we're following this morning on Live Now from Fox. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing to begin that Rafah invasion despite warnings from allies. Coming up in the 9 o'clock hour on Eastern Time, the sentencing for parents of Oxford school shooter Ethan Crumbley. We're talking about his parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley. Their sentencing expected to start today. And then around the 11 o'clock hour, we are looking ahead as we should get an update on that Baltimore Bridge collapse. The time now 6:53 on the East Coast. Let's go to our final 2-minute commercial break of the hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine, and good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, we are 5 minutes away from the top of the 7 o'clock hour on the East Coast. On this Tuesday morning, it is April 9th. As we continue to give you live events from around the world, bringing this to you live from Mecca. This as people are praying in Mecca as Ramadan draws to a close. A pretty cool shot we're getting here into our Live Now from Fox studios there in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. I wonder if there's any audio on this feed. Let's listen in.
وما لهم به من علم إن يتبعون إلا الظن وإن الظن لا يغني من الحق شيئا فأعرض عن من تولى عن ذكرنا ولم يرد إلا الحياة الدنيا ذلك مبلغهم من العلم إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بمن اهتدى ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض ليجزي الذين أساءوا بما عملوا ويجزي الذين أحسنوا.
All right, so pretty cool. We did have some audio on this feed. Again, a live picture coming out of Mecca, Saudi Arabia, as people are praying as Ramadan draws to a close. As we get these cool images here on Live Now from Fox, you know, we love to show them to you live, raw, and unfiltered. All right, the time now 6:57 on the East Coast. Switching gears, heading out to Dublin, Ireland, to another live event. This is Ireland's new leader. Simon Harris is being presented at Parliament and formally named the new leader in this area. This as Leo Varadkar stepped down back in March 20th to be exact. So this nomination and presentation underway in Dublin, Ireland. Let's listen in, and I'll pop up some boxes on the screen of other live pictures we're following this morning here on Live Now from Fox.
Populism on the vote of the order of business today. We will, of course, as a serious party, do all we can to hold this new Taoiseach and this government to account. But we will also commit to working with you where we can achieve common purpose, and we will be honest and fair, because our democracy is too precious to be denigrated in this House or in social media. So I'm asking the new Taoiseach to reciprocate that undertaking. Colleagues, there's less than a year to go, and we will all speak more later on what the new Cabinet can and must do. But for now, my call to Deputy Harris is this. If a general election will not be called now, as it should be, then you must commit to serving the people in a way that matters and to letting these houses carry out our constitutional function. So I'm asking you to stop blocking opposition bills, to publish the meaningful policies we need on building homes, increasing hospital capacity, on disability rights and on welcoming refugees. Change is not easy, it takes courage, and if you won't go to the people, Deputy Harris and your colleagues, we hope you will act to deliver real change, because we need to see that change and we need to see an Ireland that works for all.
Social Democrats.
I want to start today by again wishing Leo Varadkar the very best in the future. A record of public service in this House that extends for nearly 2 decades, including 13 years in Cabinet and 2 terms of Taoiseach, has to be commended. It requires hard work, dedication and many personal sacrifices. Those sacrifices were not just borne by the outgoing Taoiseach, but by his partner and his family, and I think it's important to acknowledge that and their contribution too. Today, the Dáil will elect Simon Harris as the 3rd Taoiseach of this government. It's a job more demanding than most of us can imagine, and on a personal note, I'd like to wish him well as Taoiseach and in his new role as leader of Fine Gael. However, we are facing serious challenges as a country. And in order to address them, we need new ideas. For that, we need a new government. So today, the Social Democrats will not be supporting his nomination. We need to see a radical change in approach of the crisis facing us in housing, healthcare, disability services, childcare and climate action. The change that we need cannot be delivered by a Taoiseach from the same party, with the same programme for government and the same policies. The issues we face and will continue to face will worsen until we elect a government with a fundamentally new approach. Ceann Comhairle, I want to start by welcoming the incoming Taoiseach's commitment to set up a new Cabinet Committee on Disability. A focus on disability is so desperately needed. Successive Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Green Party governments have left disability services threadbare, underfunded and understaffed. Disabled people and their families have to fight every step of the way for access to basic services. The reality is, it's ruining people's lives. We've heard enough platitudes. We've heard enough vague commitments. We need a government that will provide the services that people are entitled to. Assessment of need, essential therapies, personal assistance hours, the list goes on and on and on. We need a government that recognises the cost of disability with a cost of disability payment. We need a government that will replace the personal transport schemes that Fine Gael abolished over a decade ago and promised to replace. Now, we need a government that will provide actual pay parity for Section 39 workers if we're to have any hope of staffing our Children's Disability Network teams. And we need a firm commitment to naming the date for the long overdue ratification of the optional protocol. People's lives are being destroyed due to completely inadequate or non-existent services. Services that this government actually don't seem to believe they have an obligation to provide. And with that fundamentally damaging ideology at the heart of disability policy, I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that will improve the provision of disability services in this country is a change in government. But I hope that you will prove me wrong. The housing disaster is the biggest challenge facing this country. We need a government that will treat it as the national emergency that it is. People on average incomes have lost all hope that they will ever be able to buy a home like their parents did. The lives of over 500,000 adults still sleeping in their childhood bedrooms have been put on hold. We speak about this locked-out generation a lot in this chamber, and Simon Harris has spoken about him quite a lot himself over the last few days. Because we all recognise how disastrous that reality is for people's lives and for their mental health. To have the absolute basics of adulthood just kept out of reach, unable to have privacy, to have independence, to feel any hope for a future for yourself in Ireland. How can anyone start a family when they're always a letter away from eviction? Given a few short weeks to pack up their belongings, all while struggling to find a new home in the middle of a housing crisis. A home they can afford to rent that's close enough to their workplace, to their children's school, to their own parents who provide the childcare that they can't access or can't afford. It's stressful, it's damaging, and it's preventable. Because there is another way. We could introduce a no-fault eviction ban to stem the tide of rising homelessness and provide some security for renters. We could introduce a 3-year rent freeze so those struggling to pay rent have some relief and time to find their feet. We could stop the bulk buying of homes by investment funds so that first-time buyers are not bidding against billion-euro funds. And crucially, we need to acknowledge that the developer-led model of housing dependent on the private sector for delivery has failed. We could address the affordability crisis at the heart of this housing emergency by delivering social and affordable homes at scale so that the dream of home ownership can become a reality. All of this is achievable. Nobody is saying that it is easy, but none of the crises facing us in housing are insurmountable. We just need the political will and the determination to change course. The state needs to stop outsourcing its responsibilities to the private sector. Essential public services like housing, healthcare, disability services, childcare are fundamental human rights. They should be provided by the state and accessible to all, regardless of your income. Every party in this House signed up to a plan stating as much for the future of our health service. In 2017, when the incoming Taoiseach was Health Minister, there was cross-party support for the Sláintecare plan, but implementation has been painfully slow. Nearly 900,000 patients are in waiting lists. Every day, hundreds of people languish on hospital trolleys all over the country, while children with scoliosis wait for years in agony for surgery. Providing quality, accessible and timely healthcare is a basic requirement of the state. But in the Midwest, the situation has deteriorated to the extent that people are actually afraid to go to the emergency department at University Hospital Limerick. This should not and cannot be tolerated. What changes are this government going to implement to make a real difference? What are they going to do in the next year that they haven't done in the last 4? How can we rely on this government to deliver crucial healthcare reform when 7 years into a 10-year plan for Sláintecare, we are nowhere near where we should be? Ceann Comhairle, too often this government has excelled at climate rhetoric but failed at climate action. We have a responsibility to farming communities, to coastal communities, to future generations to take steps that are ambitious enough to meet the enormous challenge ahead of us. But instead, we're missing our targets. The leader of the Green Party summed it up perfectly. We're only warming up and are on course to face up to €8 billion in fines by 2030. Every second we wait to take action increases the existential threat and the costs that we face down the line. It increases the risk of floods, failed crops, coastal erosion, and irreversible damages to our ecosystem. We need a government that will approach the climate action not as a burden, but as an opportunity. We could have warmer homes, we could have pristine waters, we could protect and rejuvenate our biodiversity, we could become a net export of energy by the end of the decade, we could be held up as the example for the future of agriculture. We have the resources to make all of this happen and help those communities and industries that will be most impacted. This is why the Social Democrats want to see the budget surplus used to create a €6 billion climate transformation fund. This would include funding for rural communities, for farmers, to ensure a fair transition. Because change is coming and we have to embrace it. The approach of this government of leading farmers to a cliff edge before pushing them off is not just dishonest, it has been a disaster for the future of agriculture and for our natural environment. Ceann Comhairle, the potential and desire for change in Ireland is huge. People know that we can do better. They are demanding we do better. But I don't believe that a better Ireland can be achieved with more of the same old approach that we've seen from Fine Gael for the last 13 years. Fine Gael has been in office for almost my entire adult life. The incoming Taoiseach has been in office for almost his entire adult life. Where is the new energy? Where is the new approach? Because honestly, I can't see it. The Social Democrats will not be supporting the nomination of Simon Harris today because we want a new approach, and for that we need a change in government.
Thank you, Deputy Kern. We move now to People Before Profit Solidarity, and we're going to hear Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett sharing with Deputy Mick Barry.
Fine Gael are putting a brave face on today's events, but the real background to the ascension to office of Simon Harris is a Taoiseach and 1/3 of Fine Gael TDs abandoning the Fine Gael ship and being afraid to face the electorate in the next general election. And the reason they are abandoning the Fine Gael ship and don't want to face the electorate is because they know they have failed hundreds of thousands of people in this country on the most basic things of providing secure and affordable housing, of providing a decent health service that works, on protecting our children with special needs and those with disabilities, and providing the public services that make life bearable for people and protect people from the crippling cost of living crisis that has been inflicted on them over the last number of years. I find it particularly remarkable that the outgoing Taoiseach has attempted to absolve himself from these failures and the reasons why he's abandoning ship by making reference to international origins to the problems we face. That is really quite extraordinary. The reality is we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world where profits for corporations have gone through the roof in the period that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have been in government. Almost quadrupled since 2011. And in a wealthy country where profits are being raked in by the corporations, by the energy companies, by the corporate landlords and the vulture funds, you have left us with the worst housing and homelessness crisis the country has ever seen, and it continues to get worse day in, day out. It is shameful that there are 4,000 children in homeless accommodation and that number continues to rise. It is absolutely shameful that in a country as wealthy as ours, a generation of young and working people are priced out of the possibility of ever owning their own home, and for many of them cannot afford the utterly unaffordable rents, and we are seeing the return of mass emigration. Young people coming out of the universities and colleges that Simon Harris has been in charge of, leaving because they do not believe, they have no confidence that this government is capable of giving them a secure and affordable roof over their head. So the skills and the talents they have developed being taken elsewhere to other countries because they believe there is no future for them. The cost of living crisis that Taoiseach Varadkar referred to, saying the worst is over. Tell that to people who got their ESB and gas bills in the early months of this year. Absolutely crucifying. Or mortgage interest rate hikes that have seen people's mortgage interest payments go up by hundreds of euros every month. For many, absolutely unsustainable. Or, of course, the profiteering of rents, which are now in Dublin €2,000 to €2,500 a month. Extraordinary. 24 or 30,000 euro a year on rent on your after-tax income. Unaffordable for the vast majority of working people. Or the reference to special needs. All I am hearing at the moment in my clinic, and I've heard it around this Dáil over recent weeks, is children who can't get appointments with the Child and Disability Network teams, which are chronically understaffed, completely under-resourced and understaffed CAMS teams, schools that are actually seeing cuts in special education teaching resources, or who can't get the funding for autism classes that they are actually looking for. The failure to ratify the optional protocol for people with disabilities, the shocking fact that rather than give people rights, give people with disabilities and carers rights, they are means-tested. Means-tested and often denied the supports and the rights that they deserve. And I have to
So a very compelling conversation underway out there in Dublin, Ireland, as their new leader, Simon Harris, will soon be formally named there in Parliament. On the right side of your screen, following top stories this morning, a live look in that top right box out in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, as Ramadan prayers continue at this hour. In that bottom box, we continue to track severe weather in the southern part of the U.S. The time now 7:15 on the East Coast. We're going to go to our first 2-minute commercial break of the hour, and when we come back, heading out to Michigan, checking in as it's a historic day in a Pontiac courtroom. We'll be checking in with Fox 2 Detroit's Lauren Edwards, getting the very latest on the parents of that Oxford school shooter. We'll be right back in just 2 quick minutes. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, and good morning to you if you're just now tuning in. I'm Jeanne Francine. As we continue top stories and headlines of the day, today is a historic day in a Pontiac courtroom as the sentencing begins for the parents of the Oxford High School shooter, Ethan Crumbley. His parents are Jennifer and James Crumbley. We're expecting to hear from family members of the victims who have waited 2.5 years for this day. Fox 2 Detroit's Lauren Edwards is live this morning from the Oakland County Courthouse with the latest details. Lauren, good morning.
Good morning. In just a few short hours, Jennifer and James Crumbley will appear before a judge at the Oakland County Courthouse behind me as today is their sentencing. And yes, we are expected to hear from victims, from their families, as well, as they were definitely impacted by this tragedy. Now, both the Crumbleys were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter stemming from the November 2021 massacre at Oxford High School that sadly claimed the lives of 4 students. The gunman in that fatal shooting was the Crumbleys' teenage son. Both parents were tried separately in Oakland County, and the first parents convicted in a connection to a school shooting. Both were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter on all 4 counts, and both are looking at the max of 15 years in prison.
But the interesting question for me is, will they get the same sentence? Yes, they were convicted both of involuntary manslaughter. However, other factors have come up. This is going to be a very emotional courtroom. This is really, to some extent, the last time that the victims in this case will be able to address the people that were convicted of this crime.
Now, the Crumbleys have 42 days to file an appeal, but please stick with Fox 2 throughout the day today. We will be bringing you live coverage, reaction, updates as time passes and as it goes. And also, it is expected to be incredibly emotional as, again, we will hear from the victims and their families. Reporting live here in Detroit, in Pontiac, Lauren Edwards, Fox 2 News.
Well, Lauren, we've seen how these victim statements play out from the families, and truly not a dry eye in the courtroom when it happens. And I just want to make sure, because I know sometimes the chimes change, that sentencing expected to start at 9 o'clock this morning Eastern time, correct?
It's expected to start at 9 a.m. and it is expected to be a packed house in that courtroom. And it is expected, as so many sentencings have gone, as I've covered them, not to be a dry eye. It is filled with tears. It's very, very emotional.
Lauren Edwards there with Fox 2 Detroit. Lauren, we always appreciate your compelling reporting. You be safe out there as you work to give us the very latest details, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The time now 7:20 on the East Coast. I'm Jeanne Francine. On this Tuesday morning, it is April 9th. Let's go ahead and go to a quick 2-minute commercial break. And when we come back, continuing with those live events, top stories, and headlines of the day. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. A lot of live events this morning on the left side of your screen. We are live in Dublin, Ireland, as Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, will soon be formally named in Parliament. Right now, you have Parliament members standing up and giving either words of encouragement and even some words of disdain, saying why they do not support him becoming the new leader out there in Ireland. And on the right side of your screen, that top right box, you're getting a live look out in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, as those people are praying there as Ramadan draws to a close. And then that bottom box, we continue to track severe weather across the south. It's moving towards the southeast. A lot of systems there. So a lot going on, but let's continue to listen in out there live in Dublin, Ireland, as soon Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, will speak and formally be named there in Parliament.
That heartbreaking law, and he has also been the person who has become elevated now to the position of Taoiseach, posing as a new broom. But the truth of the matter is, despite the fact that he's throwing promises around like confetti, he is the Varadkar continuity candidate. He has been a minister for 8 years. He owns the highest homelessness numbers in the history of the state. He owns the highest house prices in the history of the state. He owns the highest rents in the history of this state. And I think he also personifies the South Dublin political bubble that can't see beyond the M50, where establishment TDs talk to themselves and the NGOs and ignore the people. I don't believe he is a man of convictions. I believe his motto is, "There go my people. I must find out which way they're going, and then I will lead them." Simon Harris has a record which I believe has cost this country dearly. He threatened striking nurses with financial penalties. He announced free smear tests for women to save himself. So much pressure on the system and leading to dangerous delays for women. In the early days of COVID, he refused to meet with the nursing home sector, which was the most vulnerable element of that crisis. Indeed, at that time, thousands of people were moved from hospitals into nursing homes. Many of them weren't tested, which seeded COVID right through the nursing home system and led to many deaths. During COVID, he cancelled cancer screening and reduced cancer services, leading to 100,000 fewer women screened for breast cancer and a tidal wave of more advanced cancers. And the billions of overspend in the National Children's Hospital was, and I quote Simon Harris, not a scandal. In 2017, he promised that no child would go beyond 4 months for an operation. A PQ from AIM2 has shown that 55 children just in Temple Street and Crumbley alone are today waiting for more than a year for scoliosis surgery. And Simon Harris was the Minister for Justice for the first half of last year. And during that time, violent crimes increased, the number of Gardaí increased, the number of Gardaí resigning and retiring increased, and the number of Gardaí being attacked increased as well. I do think this is a historic day. I think we're seeing the elevation of a caretaker Taoiseach, a Taoiseach who will have the record of having the shortest term in the history of the state.
Thank you, Deputy Shanahan.
Firstly, I want to wish fair winds to Deputy Varadkar. While you got some big calls right, the macroeconomy, the pandemic and Brexit, this has not been a government for all people, nor for all parts of Ireland. People have become divided during this government. It has pitched urban against rural, motorist against cyclist, agriculture against the environmentalist, house buyers against immigrants. The social contract for young people is burst. Expectations for housing, good work, services have all been knocked back. The Dublin Cork Cabinet have starved large swathes of Ireland of investment, of development, of economic hope for a better life. The borders, North West, Midlands and my own region, the South East, have roared at Cabinet members to advance meaningful projects outside of their own patches. The administrative burden on our families, our farmers, our small business and home builders is absolutely out of control. As politics fails these people, their anger rises. It is a political mistake not to listen. Beyond reducing bureaucracy and supporting agriculture and enterprise, in my region we have 3 tests for the new Taoiseach: 24/7, our airport and the SETU PPP and allied promised capital development. People are wondering in the South East How will our new teacher change things for us? As Minister for Health, we saw you spending on the Dublin Children's Hospital while failing to support capital spending at University Hospital Waterford. You are closely associated with the Department of Health's blocking of 24/7 cardiac care at UHW with the shoddy Herity report. You know, we have still not seen the National Cardiac Review that you commissioned as Health Minister in 2017. As Minister for Higher Education, you are closely associated with preventing a full university in Waterford, forcing an underfunded merger between WIT and IT Carlow, and allowing unfettered spending and borrowing in the national university sector. Meanwhile, SETU Waterford has not seen a single new teaching building in over 20 years. You promised new disciplines, buildings, lecturers' contracts, a borrowing framework and student accommodation, none of which have happened yet. The regional southeast brain drain has worsened. You are known for your abilities, Minister, to communicate, but talk without action remains just talk. Our late engagement over this vote has signalled to me that my priorities, actually my region's priorities, those being 24/7, the airport, the Equitable University Funding Programme, supports to our agriculture and business sectors, although in your programme for government, are not fully on your radar. For that reason, alas, I cannot vote for you as Taoiseach today. And yet, I hope you are a successful Taoiseach, a Simon 2.0 that actually fixes things, delivers a form of leadership that renews hope in politics, delivers better, simpler services to all people in parts of this republic. But most of all, I hope your tenure signals that at last the winds of positive change for Waterford and the South East are coming. Such change is the acid test for me and my constituents that finally Cabinet is willing to listen and deliver for Waterford and the South East region.
Thank you, Deputy Shanahan. Now the Rural Independent Group, where Deputy Matthew McGrath is sharing with colleagues. Deputy.
I do wish to propose an alternative in this chamber here today in the name of Deputy Michael Healy-Rae, who has represented Kerry here in this chamber for many, many years, and on Kerry County Council for many years before that. I believe he is well capable of carrying out the task because he has the understanding of the people, and like myself, he knows what the people need and what they're concerned about. I believe we're the only alternative group here in the Dáil. On many occasions we have proven that. And I say, I agree with Deputy Burke, who said democracy shouldn't be taken for granted. And I agree with that. First of all, I want to wish Deputy Radker well and good health long into the future. Ceann, I have to say that in the recent referendum and canvassing generally for our three local election candidates in Kerry, I never see people more angry or disillusioned. Farmers they see themselves being vilified and targeted here every day. Even last year, Minister Ryan ensured that the loose was painted white, 9 carriages, and advising people not to drink milk. I ask each and every one of you here today, what would we be like if our mothers didn't give us milk when we were growing up and after being born? Ridiculous stuff. And like the suggestion that one car would do 30 people in the community and that we should bring wolves into the countryside. That's what Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have supported, that kind of carry on for the last 4 to 5 years. Businesses are closing. In Killarney, another restaurant has closed today. And because of the VAT and the increase in the VAT and energy and rates cost. Housing, we know it failed completely. The immigration debacle, where over 2 billion has been spent, and even spent 860,000 euros to bring dogs and cats into the country for these immigrants. Squandering money, and yet people are out in the morning paying 40%, those working paying 40% tax and 4.5% USC charges down that. Health, we can't even get doctors. You can get a VIT quicker into any farm than to get a doctor in the evening or weekends. It's a sad state that sick people can't just get a doctor. We see in the recent referendum where there was a consensus between all the parties, including Sinn Féin, who seem to be overlapping and lining up to go with Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil.
Are you going to give way to your
Sinn Féin have been saying that Deputy Harris isn't fit to be Taoiseach. Why didn't he oppose him? One is your chance here today to oppose him. And I'm giving the independent deputies here in this chamber today, if there's any scintilla of independence in you, now's your time to come out and vote for an independent candidate for Taoiseach here today. This is your chance. But the most of you that say you're independents, you're Fine Gael attacked, and there's no difference at all now for the people outside to look in here. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are the same. Sinn Féin are lining up to go with either of them. And the Greens will be written off with the help of God.
Matty McGrath, please.
I rise today as well to second the nomination of Councillor of Deputy Michael Hilly-Ray, because I believe he's a man who listens to the people. In politics since he was 10 years of age, canvassed in by-elections, and stuck to Sedina. Listen to the people, which you've lost, completely lost. And we need to have a contest in this House. We can't just move around and have no election, and that's why we're doing this today. I want to say also to wish Leo Deputy Varadkar the best in his retirement, and as well, if Minister Harris, which he will be elected, to wish him well and his family and his wife and children as well. While we extend, as I said, the sudden departure of outgoing Taoiseach Deputy Varadkar, the government's final year creates serious instability and surrenders to the public service. It's akin to the captain of a ship being forced off when there's a shipwreck, which he's meant to stay to last. Let's be clear, Minister Harris and his few new Fine Gael ministers bring no novelty and no change to the current Fine Gael government's legacy. The legacy will be mentioned for their deceit, incompetence and decision to stop listening to the people. It has burdened the public with higher taxes and disregarded the devices of the ordinary people, both urban and rural. From the outset, the three-party coalition lacked a plan, a vision and any bit of empathy with the people that elected them. The people voted in 2020 for change. They got no change. A cobbled-together government by Deputy Martin and Deputy Varadkar. Deputy Martin was the architect because he didn't want to be the first Fianna Fáil Taoiseach, leader, never to be Taoiseach. And I say to you, Minister Harris, how can we have trust? I hold a letter here that you wrote to the pro-life campaign in 2011 in Wicklow. Dear pro-life campaign, I'm contesting the next election. I'm happy so proud to support you and enact the pro-life. In response to your questions, yes, if elected at all, I will oppose any legislation to introduce abortion in Ireland. And yes, I will support legislation that protects the human embryo and protects babies at all costs. And the legislation you brought in, how can we trust in you? The legislation was the most vicious and rigorous and disgusting that ever happened. Your legacy in health, the Children's Hospital, you made the whole lot of it. The scoliosis promise, the most fortunate people that were here a few weeks ago, that are waiting, you said 4 months, they're waiting years, languishing. Also, your attack, Fine Gael's attack on local government. You demolished local democracy. You pint set up Irish water, an unmitigated disaster. Many other. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Conglomerates is the name of the game, but for Fianna Fáil, in the beef barons, in CU Hay, Smith Roadstone, all those people, all the big monopolies then are squeezing the lifeblood out of our communities. Not what the people of Ireland give their lives for here. So I say to you, it's a sad legacy. Moving the deck chairs on this ship tonight is not going to do anything else for anybody. So I say to you, call an election and go to the people and get a fresh mandate and do something for the people.
Deputy Collins.
Thank you, Concordia. I start by wishing former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and former Minister Simon Coveney the very best in their future. This will be the third Taoiseach since government was formed in 2020, and this in itself shows how dysfunctional this government has been in the last 4 years. This government lacks understanding, lacks the ability or hunger to look after the ordinary people. This government to date has lacked common sense, and the people of this country are sick to their teeth of this government. The simple way to see how disconnected this government was with most of the opposition in the recent referendum, where people spoke emphatically, with an overwhelming majority of people rejecting Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Greens, Sinn Féin, Labour and Social Democrats' plan to remove women from our constitution. But it is not this alone that has people angered. Look at our housing crisis, which has ran out of all control, and a government running along happy with this crisis of 14,000 homeless, many of them children. Your inaction for housing in our cities, not allowing much needed development to build up where infrastructures already are in place, sees homelessness numbers crisis getting worse by day. In our countryside, between county development plans drawn up with a negative view to rural planning and another stumbling block of a planning regulator put in place by government, has seen young people coming to me weekly in high numbers being refused planning and being refused a chance to get their lives together off the ground. These are people who have a sight from their parents, who have a mortgage started, and won't be any burden on the state, but are refused for one reason or another, adding to the homeless list and our housing crisis. Our health crisis in this country is nothing short of appalling, and was the cause of the last government collapsing while you were Minister for Health, Minister Harris. We have close to 1 million people on waiting lists in this island, people in dreadful pain, seeking hip or knee surgeries or cataract surgeries to save their sight, and the list goes on and on. Thousands on hospital trolleys for days in some cases, seeking a bed, but left there in pain. These are the people who got up early in the morning in this country and worked hard and are left there in their time of need. Look at agriculture in this country, where farmers continuously tell me they are being treated as environmental terrorists, even that we have one of the best agricultural ran farms in this country. Are you, as Taoiseach, going to allow the Green Party continue to do absolute wreck to agriculture? That's a question you have to answer here today. Are you going to be a change and stand up for the people of this country? What Fine Gael did one time, they did one time stand up for the farmers of this country, but you've turned your back on them in recent years. And I'm asking you that here today. And there's a crisis on the ground as we speak. And we're getting no assistance, no farmers getting any assistance from government. Farmers are suffering severe mental health with the weather the way it is at the moment. I hope you'll announce a package this evening. Also the same with fisheries. You stood idly by year in, year out, as the only deal you got for fishermen in all that many years is a decommissioning deal to get rid of Irish trawlers out of Irish waters. It's a scandalous situation. Small businesses, 13 to 9%. You raised the VAT from 9 to 13.5%. You're putting small businesses, cafe owners, restaurants, pubs out of business, and you don't care. I don't understand what kind of a government here. And many more. Student accommodation, hate speech, all these migration, all these issues need to be discussed in proper Taoiseach before anybody would support, and anybody that supports you here today, in my view, that and will lead to further closures of pubs, of cafes, are equally responsible.
Thank you, Deputy. Please.
For those closures in their own constituencies. Thank you.
Go to the Rural Independent Group.
Thanks,
the Independent Group.
Thanks,
Deputy Collins is sharing with Deputies Connolly, McNamara, Arkin and Fitzmaurice.
Thank you. There's been a lot of fanfare that this is a new start for Fine Gael and this government and the country. In reality, what we see is the same old, stale, out-of-touch political system that has been in power since the foundation of the state. You can play political musical chairs, give everything a fresh look, but this is just two sides of the same coin. Another Taoiseach from Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, the parties that have led this country into crisis after crisis, a broken housing system with record homelessness, record house prices, record rent, continuation with no-fault evictions and no end in sight, underfunded, understaffed health and public services, high levels of low pay and growing numbers of people in deprivation, at risk of poverty and inconsistent poverty. This is why, while the rich get richer, the top 1% have accumulated 70 times more wealth than the bottom half of this country since 2012, leaving the two richest people in Ireland owning 5 billion more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. This is a fundamental issue. What 9 decades of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil rule has left us with is a country for the rich. Taxes on Irish workers are 15% above the EU average, while we have one of the lowest corporation taxes in the world. Our employers' PRSI contribution is 66% below the EU average, and our taxes on wealth are less than half of most EU countries. 9 decades of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have created a country where working class people pay high taxes for failing public services, while the rich pay low taxes and can afford the best private services. From talking to people in my constituency, I don't think anyone buys for 1 second that this is a new beginning. This is the same old out-of-touch government with the same old out-of-touch parties that created a country that is getting harder and harder to make a decent life. You created the housing crisis, the crisis in our public services, and have stood over a massive transfer of wealth to the rich while deprivation and consistent poverty grows. We can no longer afford a political system that allows this to continue while everyone else struggles to find homes, services and decent wages. We can no longer afford to have Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in power. Today is about the politics, not about the personalities. This is why people want a general election. Many people want a general election now. It is why I'm not voting for the proposed Taoiseach or from the proposed nomination from the Rural Independents.
Deputy Councillor Connolly.
Agus Boatum Cogorges, her anul don ear Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, vi tú ganta le the fragri igoni agus hanny shish and lum in anon nar hanny na fragri lum. Agus Boatum Ked Mila Falja, Corref Clan, Simon Harris on Shaw, and Van Kele Quiva, na Tishmahori Bart, agus Mary, agus na Gasur Killian, agus Saoirse, gone out, is privileged mahas ama, agus lost starul in you, agus Furier ni vaime an mahakioch the horch ditcha, bunia the policy, near level parsanta. Today is a very important day without a doubt for the Fine Gael party and for your family, and it's an absolute privilege, and I welcome your family here. You will not be having my support based on the policies that your party and your colleagues have continued with for years, where you talk about collateral damage. And this was encapsulated lately for me by Professor John Fitzgerald when he dealt with the Germany saying we had a very housing crisis. And Professor John Fitzgerald said they were simply jealous and our problems arose from a successful economy. And I think that's what you accept. The problems are collateral to a successful economy, and I fundamentally disagree with that. Today, as I speak, there are 13,841 children, people and children homeless directly as a result of your policy. Yesterday in Galway, 71 people were on trolleys. Less than a year ago, the HICWA visited Galway and said when there were 25 on trolleys, it was grossly overcrowded. None of these policies happened by accident. They are the direct result of year government, continuous governments, relying on a market, commodifying everything, and having no sense whatsoever as to what a republic truly means, and what public services truly mean, and what equality truly means. You're all waiting for the boats to rise with the tide. Nothing has changed as a result of COVID. Nothing has changed as a result of climate change, where we urgently require transformative change. They're not empty words. And when the former Taoiseach stands up, and the Taoiseach stands up today and talks about these problems being caused by outside events, you're totally wrong and refusing to accept or look in the mirror and realise they're directly arising from your policies.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to Deputies Coveney and Varadkar and their contribution to Irish life at some difficult junctures. Moving on to Deputy Harris, it's a motion of confidence in you as Taoiseach. Over the weekend you promised that you would have the back of farmers, but you have served in a government which has been on the back of farmers. Like many small business owners, the only thing they get from government is a letter warning of new regulations threatening new fines. The cost of government in this state has ballooned since you entered Cabinet in 2016. It was 68 billion then, it's 110 billion now. Can anybody in this state say that the services on which they rely have increased by that proportion? That they're getting much better services now than they did then? Can anybody say that the infrastructure on which they rely to get to work, to live, is improving by that magnitude? So where is the money going? It is simply unclear, because anybody who rings any government department now will be put on hold and will be almost certainly not get through to anybody. They simply won't get an answer. The civil service do a wonderful job sometimes, but they require leadership, and they have become complacent and moribund under the lifetime of this government. Thank you. For that reason, I'm afraid I can't vote confidence in you.
Minister, I cannot vote for you as Taoiseach because after 4 years of this government and 13 years of Fine Gael in government, you have not delivered for the North West. Earlier, Taoiseach Varadkar, who I wish well in his retirement from office, spoke of global megatrends influencing outcomes. Well, in my view, the only way to counter those trends in the context of balanced regional development is to have systemic and substantial policy-driven change across all government departments. You have not done that, and so regions like the North West lag behind. You've not addressed or delivered housing for the North West. CSO housing commencement figures show that in 2023, the 4 counties I represent, Sligo, Leitrim, North Roscommon and South Donegal, were in the bottom 10 counties when it came to housing commencements on a per capita basis. You've not delivered on health, where Trolley Watch figures show that from 2011, when Fine Gael entered government, the numbers on trolleys at Sligo University Hospital have increased by over 250%, while the national increase is 50%. The figures speak for themselves. You've not delivered on agriculture, where you were cheerleaders for the nature restoration law, without mitigating outcomes for the drained peatlands in the North West and no ring-fenced funding. Finally, Minister, I fully recognise that today is a momentous day for you and your family. And while I won't be voting for you as Taoiseach, on a personal level, I wish you and your family all that's good.
On a personal level, first of all, the outgoing Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, and Minister Coveney, on your future, I want to wish you the best of luck. This is impersonal towards the new Taoiseach, but I cannot support a government that you have a minister there that has gone out to Brussels, and the Irish farmers under the nature restoration law are relying on Italy, they're relying on the Dutch, they're relying on several other countries, and you won't listen to the Irish farmers here. And this government is supporting that. Minister, or future Taoiseach, you also stated in Galway at the weekend, I saw on the headlines, that you have the back of rural Ireland. When you drove from Galway in your state car back to Dublin, when people in Roscommon, in Lochfuinchina, 92-year-old, 87-year-old, had their houses been flooded, are looking at water higher than their kitchens, and ye have not signed an emergency order to help those people. This is a problem not only in Roscommon, but it will be everywhere around the country. And you spoke in Galway about having the backs of farmers. It's a knife in the back that has been given to the farming community right around this country. And I cannot and will not support a government that is decimating parts of rural Ireland. The best thing, or the thing that ye have done most in rural Ireland, is cause protest, with basically not talking, not listening, not giving the services to the people that require it in rural Ireland. On a personal basis, I wish you luck, but I cannot support this government with what's going on, especially with the Green Party.
So that gentleman wrapping up his remarks there in Parliament, as Ireland's new leader Simon Harris will soon formally be named there in Parliament. And then you have different Parliament members standing up, giving their support or non-support for Simon Harris. On the right side of your screen, following other top stories this morning, giving you a live look in that top right box out in Saudi Arabia as people are participating in those Ramadan prayers. And then that bottom box, we are on weather watch, tracking severe weather across the south and southeast. The time now 7:52 on the East Coast. Let's go to our final 2-minute commercial break of the hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, and good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Jeanne Francine here with you on this Tuesday morning. It is April 9th, 5 minutes from the top of the hour, now 7:55 on the East Coast. We have a lot of top stories and headlines and live events that we want to share with you. Right now, I want to give you a live look out in Gaza as we continue to discuss the very latest of the Israel-Hamas war. We know Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has escalated his pledge to invade the Southern Gaza city of Rafah, which is filled with about 1.4 million Palestinians, most of whom are displaced from other parts of the Gaza Strip. All of this amid a looming humanitarian crisis and concerns of a regional conflict some say is already underway. Of course, we'll have more details on the Israel-Hamas war this morning. And of course, that daily Israeli government briefing, I'm being told by my producer, that update is expected for 8:30 this morning Eastern time. So, of course, when that happens, we will bring you the very latest. Another top story we are following this morning takes us out to Michigan as the parents of a Michigan school shooter are asking a judge to keep them out of prison as they face sentencing for their role in an attack that killed 4 students back in 2021. James and Jennifer Crumbley are scheduled to appear in court today for the close of a pioneering case. They're the first parents convicted in a U.S. mass school shooting. We did check in earlier with Fox 2 Detroit, learning more about what will happen inside the courtroom today. We should get testimony from victims' families and those impact statements. Again, this relates to that Oxford school shooter, Ethan Crumbley. His parents there on your screen now facing charges and being held responsible for providing that weapon on Christmas that was used for that deadly mass shooting. So we will continue to follow that this morning. That sentencing expected to get underway out in Pontiac, Michigan, coming up in the 9 o'clock hour this morning. So when that happens, of course, we will bring that to you right here on Live Now from Fox. All right, switching gears to another top story we're following, giving you a live look at our XRAD system, and you can see it's very active this morning. Several storm systems brewing now at 7:56 on the East Coast, impacting several states. You see Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, even the Carolinas being impacted, and we do see some remnants moving over into Florida. I heard our Fox 35 Orlando team speaking that tomorrow could be a severe weather day. So, of course, we are keeping a close eye on severe weather as well. But right now I want to transition to a top story many of you all were following yesterday, and one that we continue to keep a close eye on here, right here on Live Now from Fox. As we know, after months of anticipation, the total eclipse finally graced cities across the U.S. from Texas all the way to Maine. Fox News correspondent Connor Hansen joining us now. He was actually in the path of totality in Buffalo, New York. He joins us now with more on this story.
Cities across the U.S. were packed with millions of sky gazers in the path of totality. Now people are heading home after an experience they'll never forget.
It's an amazing experience, and I'm glad that my friends and I decided to come out today. Like, you feel like an invigoration or something. It's weird. Like you can't put your finger on it.
The total eclipse darkening skies across America for up to 4 minutes at a time. Cameras using special filters to capture incredible footage of the sun blazing behind the moon's path. Diamond ring! And cloudy weather reports in upstate New York didn't stop hundreds of thousands from gathering in cities like Buffalo and Rochester.
We've been waiting for this moment for a very long time, so we're excited, a little sad because the clouds.
Yeah. Vermont and Maine saw the final glimpses of the total eclipse.
This is pretty special, probably the only time I'll get a chance.
The next one in North America won't come until 2044.
Because I'm 92. The next will be 20 years. So it's definitely my last one, I hope.
Aside from the spectacle here on the ground, NASA also funding projects studying the sun's impact on Earth. In Buffalo, New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
All right, Connor, thank you so much. And I know there were concerns yesterday for many viewers, some specifically in the Cleveland area, as there were some rain showers and even some concerns of cloud cover as it related to the eclipse. And as we talk about eclipse recaps and severe weather, right now I want to check in with our content partners over at Fox Weather, as there is a multi-day severe weather pattern threatening the South. Let's listen in.
But also damaging winds and tornadoes. Everything's on the table today.
Yeah, sure is. Everything but the kitchen sink, right? With this system, we're talking rounds of rain soaking parts of the Mississippi and Tennessee river valleys. That could bring life-threatening flooding to low-lying areas.
And although we said move over solar eclipse, you know, it was pretty cool.
It was. Right?
We got to talk a little bit about it. We're going to break down some of the most beautiful views of darkness that you'll ever see. Fox Weather First continues right now. We're coming to you live from our headquarters here at Fox Weather First in New York. I'm Britta Merwin.
Yeah, as you said, Michael Estimate here, but it was gorgeous yesterday. We have to admit the fact that never has darkness seemed so beautiful and colorful.
You know, it kind of feels like the day after a big event, because you spend so much time planning it, you get to experience it, and now we kind of have like this whole like
afterglow.
Exactly.
Almost.
A little bit of a deep breath.
Yes.
After that, though, we have a big day ahead of us, and really today is the kickoff to a very long stretch of severe weather. So you kind of have to be on guard for multiple days with the potential of golf ball size hail and also tornadoes.
It was pretty wild, too, because in Dallas-Fort Worth, if you were joining us way early this morning, there were showers, there were rude thunderstorms that woke people up.
Rude because they woke you up.
Yeah, and you know what? One person I think was woken up by the thunderstorms was Fox Weather's Stephen Morgan. And Stephen, I know that, of course, you're going to be talking about the eclipse and what you saw there later, but those storms, from what I understand, they woke you up out of bed.
Yeah, you know, the high from the eclipse actually kept me awake all night, so we can't blame the storms this morning. It's still that I'm considering what just happened yesterday. I mean, it was an incredible day, and what timing, right? Because we do have this very active, wet stretch of weather for Dallas, for much of Texas, for the Gulf Coast, as we head into the day today, already beginning, started late last night, Wednesday and Thursday. And so the stage is now being set for weather, I guess, par for the course to return in the severe form. It is, though, a threat that needs to be taken seriously. Every time this year we begin to see the systems and the troughing out to the west really have an impact on what we get in the plains, and oftentimes that does translate to severe weather. So looking at that threat that we have in notably Texas today, there's a tornado risk we need to be aware of. It's along the Louisiana and Texas state line. North into Dallas, we have that threat. It's not zero, a lower threat for supercells that could produce tornadoes. However, the threat is big for what we have, at least in Texas, for hail. That's going to be the other significant threat that we need to watch for. But Britta and Michael, as we play this out throughout the day, it's not going to be one complex. There's maybe several complexes that we'll be watching through the Lone Star State that we need to pay attention to. Any of them could produce the large hail damaging winds or a tornado.
And you know, you talk about these complexes that develop. Timing is key for that. There are computer models suggesting that we'll have a group of thunderstorms kind of moving into the Houston area while we're sleeping tonight. That's a huge concern because we have such a high risk of tornadoes, large hail. So this is one of those nights that you have to go to bed ready to go. Stephen, we'll check in with you in just a moment to really highlight some of the other things. But, you know, looking into some of these specific threats, Michael, I mean, the tornado risk is one that we can't ignore, especially considering that some of these tornadoes could be EF2 or stronger.
Yeah, and we're talking winds between like 136 to 165 mile per hour winds. That's typically what an EF2 to EF3.
It does significant damage to your property.
Absolutely, to your life, to your property. And it's really going to be important that today and really in the days to come, because this is going to be a multifaceted threat throughout several days, that you know, you have the tornadic threat, you have the strong damaging wind threat with an MCS type of system that could move on through. Those are mesoscale convective systems. They look like big bows, if you will, that just plow along, say, I-10. That could
and
be a
those
threat,
really
too.
come down to nowcasting. I mean, a lot of times these complexes of thunderstorms, they trigger over what happened about 12 hours previously. So there's a lot of nitty-gritty down here that really comes down to trends that we're tracking on radar. So we'll have to look out for is what happens this afternoon. Does that sustain? Where does it go? Where does it tamper down? Because that can be ignition for what's going to happen later on in the time frame. So there's a look at our exclusive Fox model, sort of giving you the timeline. 3 p.m. we're looking out for development in the Hill Country. That's between Waco and Austin. We'll be looking out for that area, and then we'll track those thunderstorms as they continue to move into Louisiana. But then here's a look at the second ignition after 11 p.m. tonight. Look out towards Hill Country again. We have another complex of storms that triggers on our exclusive Fox model. Does that hold together for Houston? We'll see. The timing would be a huge concern because it would be in the middle of the night. We're talking about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. These huge thunderstorms moving into the northern part of the Houston area that can produce not only tornadoes but also a flood risk. So as I'm going to bed tonight, if I lived in Houston, how I would be preparing my family is not parking my car out in the street. I would keep it up high, not only because of street flooding, but also keep it in a garage if you can because of the threat of large hail. But then also I always talk about a living room camp up setup. This is a part of the country that we don't have basements, and so you want to make sure that you have an easy way to get your family to that safe spot if those tornado warnings do happen in the middle of the night.
Yeah, especially, you know, I want to focus on what you just mentioned here as we move the story forward. When severe weather happens at night, it can be so much more lethal. So
it's hard to communicate. I mean, you got people that are sleeping.
Yeah, and that's the problem right there. But it's not just Texas. Places like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, the capital city, Jackson, Mississippi as well, the capital city there, over toward Birmingham, Alabama, especially as we head into Wednesday evening and Thursday time frame. This system, it's moving from the west toward the east, and tomorrow
it really
is going to be the
ramps
bullseye.
up. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the storm system itself, this area of low pressure that right now we're tracking, it's moving from New Mexico into West Texas as we speak. It's going to pulsate. It's going to really flex its muscle, and tomorrow it is a bigger deal. Let's bring Stephen back in on the conversation. Stephen, let's talk about what we're expecting in this significant outlook. It's a 4 out of 5 alert for severe weather. Yep. When you look at the occurrence of it during peak severe weather season in the spring, typically we would get
and we appreciate our content partners over at Fox Weather keeping us weather ready. Right now, I want to transition to some news that we brought to you during the 7 o'clock hour, taking us out to Dublin, Ireland. This as we are following the very latest Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, to be formally named in Parliament. The vote underway right now, just wrapping up. Let's listen in.
Deputy Thomas Byrne. Deputy Jackie Cahill. Deputy Dara Callery. Deputy Jack Chambers. Deputy Niall Collins. Deputy Barry Cowan. Deputy Cahill Crowe. Deputy Cormac Devlin. Deputy Stephen Donnelly. Deputy Joe Flaherty. Deputy Sean Fleming. Deputy Norma Foley. Deputy Sean Haughey. Deputy John Lahart. Deputy James Lawless. Deputy Micheál Martin. Deputy Paul McAuliffe. Deputy Charlie McConalogue. Deputy Michael McGrath. Deputy John McGuinness. Deputy Andreas Moynihan. Deputy Michael Moynihan. Deputy Jennifer Monan O'Connor. Deputy Eamon O'Keefe. Deputy Dara O'Brien. Deputy Jim O'Callaghan. Deputy James O'Connor. Deputy Willie O'Dea. Deputy Christopher O'Sullivan. Deputy Pádraig O'Sullivan. Deputy Anne Rabbitt. Deputy Brendan Smith. Deputy Niamh Smith. Deputy Robert Troy. Deputy Colin Brophy. Deputy Richard Bruton. Deputy Colin Burke. Deputy Peter Burke. Deputy Kieran Cannon. Deputy Joe Carey, Deputy Jennifer Carroll McNeil, Deputy Simon Coveney, Deputy Michael Creed, Deputy Alan Dillon, Deputy Pascal Donoghue, Deputy Bernard Durkin, Deputy Damien English, Deputy Alan Farrell, Deputy Frankie Feehan, Deputy Charles Flanagan, Deputy Brendan Griffin, Deputy Simon Harris, Deputy Martin Hayden, Deputy Emer Higgins, Deputy Heather Humphreys, Deputy Paul Keogh, Deputy Josepha Madigan, Deputy Helen McEntee, Deputy Joe McHugh, Deputy Hildegard Naughton, Deputy Kieran O'Donnell, Deputy Patrick.
So right now, a roll call vote underway there inside of Parliament in Dublin, Ireland, as we are awaiting Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, to be formally named. They did do a vote, and then we heard some speaking, and we're waiting for that final roll call tally, and then they did the roll call vote verbally. So we're going to go ahead and go to a quick 2-minute commercial break, and when we come back, we're actually going to be transitioning to get the very latest on former President Donald Trump. We're hearing he's in some hot water for his abortion stance. We'll be checking in with Fox News Channel's Doug Luzader for the very latest. We'll be right back in just 2 quick minutes. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine. The time now 8:12 on the East Coast. Good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, I want to give you a live look out at the U.S. Capitol out in Washington, D.C. And as we talk about the very latest in politics, we know former President Donald Trump is getting some blowback this morning for his abortion stance just a day after his highly anticipated announcement, as President Biden may run afoul for the U.S. Supreme Court in his effort to win over young voters. Doug Luzader joins us live this morning from Washington with more. Doug, good morning to you.
Good morning. And these are two issues that may fuel turnout in November. And as far as the abortion issue is concerned, former President Trump says that should be left up to the states to decide.
Whatever they decide must be the law of the land. In this case, the law of the state.
Former President Trump steering clear of a specific abortion policy in this announcement. He did support IVF fertility treatments, but by punting to the states on abortion limits, he took some incoming from traditional allies. The president of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America wrote, "We are deeply disappointed in President Trump's position. Unborn children and their mothers deserve national protections."
Banning late-term abortions with exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother is where America's at.
When Senator Lindsey Graham expressed his disappointment, Trump went after him, writing that Graham is doing a great disservice to the Republican Party and to our country. And Republicans say the focus should be on Democrats and what limits, if any, they would place on even late-term abortions.
Our president, Joe Biden.
At the same time, President Biden hoping to build support among young voters, promising in Wisconsin yesterday to have taxpayers begin covering student loan debt for some 30 million borrowers. That's despite a clear statement from the Supreme Court that a similar plan had to go through Congress.
Folks, I will never stop to deliver student debt relief on hardworking Americans.
While this effort at debt relief may ultimately be struck down again by the Supreme Court, that might not happen until after the November election. Back to you guys.
Doug Luzader there reporting from Washington. Doug, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Live Now from Fox. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Transitioning now to another story we are keeping a close eye on, taking you back out live to Dublin, Ireland, as we are taking a close look at a vote that is underway. The last time we were looking in at this feed, Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, to be formally named in Parliament. They were doing a roll call vote. Let's listen in to see the very latest. All right, so it looks like they have cut the feed to have some discussion as it relates to this roll call vote. We are waiting Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, to be formally named in Parliament. We do know back in March, the last person to hold this role, Leo Varadkar, he stepped down on March 20th, and then Simon Harris was named Ireland's new leader. But of course, as we know, he has to formally be voted upon there in Parliament. Just trying to keep a close look at this feed as we do see that the speaker is getting up now to converse there with the chair. So let's go ahead and go to a quick 2-minute commercial break. The time now 8:17. We'll come back to this feed. Hopefully there will be audio there, but if not, we'll head on over to other top stories and live events that we're following this morning on Live Now from Fox. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine. In perfect timing, I'm hearing that the Parliament is back in session, ready to give a decision on this vote. Let's listen in.
Therefore. Darabhíonn mar sin go an teachta Simon Harris Rounathe when a cheapathe ag an uachtarán mar Taoiseach. I just want to formally welcome the members of the Harris family to the Distinguished Visitors Gallery. You're all very welcome. I do believe that this will be a memory that will be firmly ensconced in the memories of Cillian and Saoirse. Long may you remember this great achievement on the part of your dad. Now, Taoiseach Collect, do you think you might be able to say a few words to us?
Gur mágad cean cóir le gur mágah as octver cuid voti buchas le Peter agus Heather don Fúcail Cinolcha. And I do accept this nomination to serve as Taoiseach, and I commit to doing everything that I can to honour the trust that you have placed in me today. I want to begin by thanking my own party, Fine Gael, and also our partners in government, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party, for their votes, and also for the independent TDs who supported my nomination here today. This is very much a partnership government, and I intend to lead it in the spirit of unity, collaboration, and mutual respect. Today I want to pay tribute to our outgoing Taoiseach, to my colleague, to my friend, Deputy Leo Varadkar. The history books will absolutely record the incredible service that he did for our country in dealing with some of the biggest challenges of our time, most notably Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic. But history will also record that he was a trailblazer as we broke free from some of the worst prejudices of our past and showing Ireland at its best to the world. Gur mágad, Leo. I also want to pay tribute to my friend and colleague Simon Coveney, who's stepping down as a minister after serving our country with distinction in so many different roles over so many different years. In particular, I think any objective analysis will never forget all that he did for our country during the darkest days of Brexit. And today we acknowledge that. We thank you for your contribution to Ireland, and I know it's a contribution you will continue. Today is indeed a very special day for me. When I started campaigning on issues close to my heart and got involved in politics, I chose this life. But my family did not. They've been very patient today. But through every step of the journey, they have supported me without question. I want to particularly thank my parents, Mary and Bart, who are here today. They have been my driving force, often making many personal sacrifices for their three children. I hope they can be proud today of their eldest son, because I absolutely know I would not be standing here were it not for them. I want to thank my sister Gemma and my brother Adam. They are my best friends, and we are each other's biggest supporters. And I also want to thank my Nana, who is here with us today. My biggest thank you. My biggest thank you goes to my wife Kiva, who is my rock and an incredible mother to our two beautiful children. And lastly, to my children Saoirse and Cillian, who mean the absolute world to me. I promise being your dad will remain my most important job. It is. It is 13 years since I made my maiden speech in this chamber to nominate Enda Kenny as Taoiseach, someone who went on to fulfil the considerable faith that so many of us had in him, as he led a government that helped to rescue our economy and restored our economic sovereignty. Back then I reflected on what values I thought were needed for the job in hand: integrity, honesty and a work rate which cannot be surpassed. As Taoiseach, I will demand of myself what I saw as so important then, and to return to the words I spoke that day, I promise to preside over a government committed to public service at a time when such commitment is so urgently required. I believed then that a Taoiseach should work every day to realise the hopes, dreams and aspirations of all our people, and I still do. So today, Ceann Comhairle, I accept this new role in a spirit of humility, ready for the challenge and full of energy and determination about what can be achieved. As Taoiseach, I want to bring new ideas, a new energy and I hope a new empathy to public life. But politics is never about the office holder. This is not about me. It is about all of us, working together to serve the people. We as a people, we as a country, have over the last 100 years worked tirelessly together to create our own future. Collectively, this country can and should be proud of the progress that it has made. The number of people with a job is higher than ever before. The number of people accessing education is amongst the highest in the European Union. But now is an opportune moment to build a new social contract, one which renews our promise as a republic, to create equality of opportunity, to support those who need the state the most, to protect our hard-earned economic success, to use its benefits to deliver tangible outcomes to society. Time is certainly short, and there's lots to do. Housing remains the greatest societal and economic challenge of our generation. Today I recommit to moving mountains to help build more homes and drive more home ownership. I will work tirelessly to support the delivery of sláinte care, and will prioritise the delivery of mental health services, and in a step change in how we care for our older people. And I mean this seriously. I want to work with colleagues across this House to deliver real and meaningful reform for people with disabilities. As Taoiseach, I want to see everyone reach their full potential. I want to help create an Ireland that drives innovation and creativity, an Ireland that is compassionate, tolerant and respectful, a country that gives every child an equal start in life, an Ireland that protects our children's future by acting decisively on the climate crisis, an Ireland that values community and rural and regional development. This is a time of great challenge. It's a time in the world where leadership matters. In Ukraine, we see brave and courageous people standing firm against unprovoked war and aggression. In Gaza, we are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe, and we are seeing innocent children, women and men being starved and slaughtered. We have not been silent on the unforgivable terrorist actions of Hamas on October the 7th, nor can we be silent on the disproportionate reaction of the Israeli government. And as a country, we will play our part in helping bring about ceasefire and a lasting peace. Later this week, I will travel to Brussels and deliver those messages to Europe on behalf of the Irish people. Ireland's position in Europe is vital to our economic and social success. It has in many ways now become a part of our national identity. Yesterday I was honoured to join with government colleagues in meeting with the First and Deputy First Ministers of Northern Ireland at the North-South Ministerial Council. And as Taoiseach, I pledge to guard and honour my role as protector and guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. We have so much more to achieve for all communities on this island, and I look forward to working very much with the Northern Ireland Executive, because Ireland must never take peace or freedom for granted. Our political history has been defined by our quest for freedom. Freedom of country, freedom of conscience, the freedom to achieve freedom. Today, in the 21st century, our destiny is to build on these achievements, to provide hope, to provide opportunity, to provide a better future for all. This must be our mission, our pledge to the generations to come. Whilst I am proudly the leader of Fine Gael, I will lead a coalition of 3 parties. And today, I sincerely promise to be a Taoiseach for all. No matter your political persuasion, I will work with you and for the country that I know we all love. I will be a Taoiseach who will listen, and my message is simple. I want to work every day to improve the lives of all in this country. Fueled by hope and driven by a vision of a better Ireland, I will provide a new leadership and a new energy, and I intend to act decisively in the best interests of our people. Going back centuries, our shared history is more than simply a narrative of oppression and resistance and the courageous triumph over adversity. It is a story about belief in each other, of faith in the future. The Irish story is a story of hope. A spirit of optimism sustained us in the darkest of days. And today, once again, we must ensure it lights our way forward. Let us not make the mistake of giving in to pessimism and despair about our future. History has been written in Dáil Éireann so many times since January 1919. We can and must write it again by rising above partisan politics, by working together to solve the greatest challenges of our time. The people expect us to do more. We should demand of ourselves no less.
Anishtan dollar fionri gudi lahur teresha kuig. Lahur teresha kuig.
So that Parliament session wrapping up, and you got to watch live, raw and unfiltered out in Dublin, Ireland, as Ireland's new leader, Simon Harris, was formally voted there into Parliament and named as the new leader. And then he gave his address there to Parliament with his family and also his supporters there to watch. The time now 8:31 on the East Coast. Let's go ahead and go to our third 2-minute commercial break of the hour. And when we come back, heading out to get the very latest on the Israel-Hamas war. You're getting a live look out there in Gaza, and in the distance you can see plumes of smoke where some missile strikes have just happened. When we come back, we'll be checking in with the Israeli government, getting the very latest for their daily Israeli briefing, giving an update on the war, the latest on the hostage situation, and hopefully an update on those ceasefire talks that are underway in Egypt. We'll be right back in just 2 quick minutes. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, and good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Jeanne Francine, giving you another live look out in Gaza as we continue to talk about the very latest of the Israel-Hamas war. We do see the slate up now for the Israeli government for them to give their daily briefing, giving us the very latest on the Israel-Hamas war and hostage situation. Let's listen in.
Is David Mencer, and I'm an Israeli government spokesman. Today is Tuesday, the 9th of April, 2024, day 186 of the October 7th war. 186 days on, our determination to achieve our war aims remains focused. To bring home our hostages, 133 of them, mums, dads, kids. To destroy Hamas, we are destroying Hamas. The IDF has taken out 19, almost 20 Hamas battalions, destroyed 13,000 terrorists targeted and killed, with a similar number injured, taken off the battlefield, apprehended. That's at least 26,000 terrorists off the battlefield. But this victory requires the final 4 terrorists battalions in Rafah. We know that they're there, and the Prime Minister has made clear that a date has been identified. And with all this, Gaza will never again be a threat to us. I want to deal with how this conflict is being spoken about head on. I want to set the record straight on a number of important issues. To those that parrot the genocide libel, it really is a red line. They embrace the Hamas talking points and ignore the leading military experts in urban warfare who could not be clearer. Israel has set the new gold standard for urban warfare. Of course, every civilian casualty is a tragedy, but these experts have made clear we have set the new gold standard for urban warfare. And if you wouldn't take Al-Qaeda or ISIS figures on face value, then why on earth would you take Hamas's? And to those that parrot the destruction and Gazans returning to a destroyed Khan Yunis, it's not due to how Israel fights this war, it's due to how Hamas fights this war. Human shields and using the landscape within and under the city to hide and attack. And of course, the starvation libel parroted so liberally. Yesterday alone, enough food went into Gaza to feed every single person there. The UN fails to distribute it, and Hamas steals it. Just yesterday, these are the facts, just yesterday, 419 aid trucks went in, the highest number of aid trucks to enter Gaza in any one day since the start of the war. That's 741 humanitarian trucks in the last 2 days alone. Again, these are facts. Of those, a mere 267 trucks were distributed by the United Nations. We are getting the aid in, but the UN is unfortunately failing Gazans with chaotic distribution. Look, 97 trucks could fit comfortably on a playing field in a football stadium. That's 7 football stadiums full of aid in 2 days alone, all delivered safely into Gaza. This is unprecedented. Hamas creates an image of a humanitarian crisis. Where there is hunger in Gaza, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas. These are the images they create. These are the images they want you to see. I can guarantee 3 things. Firstly, no one in Hamas is hungry. When we've apprehended them, there's been no sign of hunger whatsoever. Number 2, Hamas steals the aid. Just watch the Reuters live stream of aid going in and you'll see Hamas gunmen sitting on top of those trucks. And number 3, Hamas wants to maximize the suffering of ordinary Gazans. Why? To stop the war and to save their own skins. Now I want to update you on the hostage negotiations. Of course, we will not be giving a running commentary, just to say that the Prime Minister last night received a detailed report on the talks in Cairo. Our hostages are an open wound in Israeli society. All of us here are focused constantly on securing their release. And finally, in Gaza, the senior Hamas rocket specialist, Khatem al-Ameri, we located him, he was identified, he's fired his last rocket at Israel. We did this for Israel, of course, but we also did it for Gazans too, because we're liberating Gaza from Hamas. And also because 20% of the Hamas rockets fired from Gaza actually land back inside Gaza. So that brings us to the end of today's briefing. I will now take your questions. In the chat, please add your news outlet. Thank you very much.
First question, Joel Polak, Breitbart News. Can you confirm reports that Israel is buying 40,000 tents ahead of a possible Rafah operation? And is Israel worried about ammunition supplies if the United States restricts aid?
On the first question of tents, Joel, thank you for the question. Just to say, we've all seen those reports, and I can say that we are preparing shelters. That's for sure. That's something I can say. That's all I can add to this particular report. On the question of arms and the US support, the Prime Minister has quoted Winston Churchill when Churchill said to FDR, to President Roosevelt, he said, "Give us the tools to finish the job." And we say the same thing in the words of the Prime Minister, give us the tools to finish the job. Our victory is your victory. Iran, who is behind this conflict, is the enemy of Israel, but of course, they are the enemy of the US and all of the free world. And when I say Iran, I mean the regime in Iran. I don't mean the people of Iran. They oppress their own people, and they're trying to keep their hold on power by threatening us, but it won't work. Next question, please.
Question from Hannah Julian, the Jewish Press. Turkey today halted exports to Israel of many products, including the export of aviation fuel. What is Israel's response to this move? Does Israel have other sources from which to obtain aviation fuel? And if so, can you reveal who those exporters are?
Hannah, thank you very much for that question. So on Turkey, our Foreign Minister, Yisrael Katz, said, and that was released just this morning, you can check it out, that Erdogan, unfortunately, is once again sacrificing the economic interests of the people of Turkey for his support of Hamas, the murderers in Gaza who raped, murdered and desecrated the bodies of women, girls, adults, and burned children alive. We've made it quite clear that Israel will not give in to violence and extortion, and we will not condone the one-sided violation of the trade agreements, and we will take parallel measures against Turkey which will harm the Turkish economy. Now, the Foreign Minister said that he's ordered the preparation of another list of products that Israel will, for Israel to prevent Turkey from exporting. And in addition, the Foreign Minister has instructed the Israeli Foreign Ministry officials to contact countries and organizations in the United States to stop investments in Turkey and to prevent the import of products from Turkey, and to our friends in the American Congress to examine the violation of the boycott laws and impose sanctions on Turkey accordingly. So that's quite clear from Israel's Foreign Minister. Thank you, Hannah. Next question, please.
Question from Frederick Egger for Interplanetary TV. Videos have been circulating on social media showing Hamas members or civilian Gazans throwing away in bins hundreds of pre-cooked meals instead of being distributed as humanitarian aid for free. The IDF found humanitarian aid food supplies and meant to supply the needy sold on the black market at high prices. Is Israel's government aware, and can they confirm it? And what can it do about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred, for that question. Yes, of course, we've seen those reports. No one who's seen those reports can be anything but shocked, especially with Israel being maligned so often with this trope of Israel being maligned with this idea of famine and shortages in Hamas. Look, before this war, there were 70 food trucks a day, 70 food trucks a day going into Gaza. as I've made clear, more than 400 trucks, 421 from my briefing just now, have gone in over the last day, more than 700 over the last 2 days. There is food going into Gaza. The UN, unfortunately, are hopelessly inefficient in distributing it. And we know, of course, that Hamas steals much of the aid. We've seen videos and reports of bustling markets in Gaza, both north and south. You know, where there is hunger in Gaza, it is hunger orchestrated by Hamas. This is just another tool of warfare, oppressing their own people to try and put international pressure on Israel. But the game's up, Hamas. Much of the world are starting to see through this ruse, and the pictures can't lie any longer. We are getting food into Gaza. We're getting as much as we possibly can, and you can be sure of this, that the aim of this war is not only to stop Hamas oppressing the people of Israel, but it's also to free Gaza from Hamas. Next question, please.
Question from David Clement from the News Forum. The UN Security Council has put Palestinian statehood to the committee. Does the PM have a comment about the prospect of UN recognizing Palestinian statehood?
So, David, thank you very much for that pertinent question. Look, if there is any sense in this world that a reward for the October 7th massacre, when this country was brutally broken into by the army of Hamas, which raped and pillaged and desecrated my people, if the reward for that outrageous action is a Palestinian state, it will be an encouragement to every single terrorist organization in the entire world to copy and paste. Outrageous terrorist actions will lead to their demands being accepted. It cannot be the case that the reward for the October 7th massacre is a Palestinian state. It cannot be the case, and we will not accept it. Next question, please.
Final question, second question from Hannah Julian, the Jewish Press. There were reports that Hamas said during talks that it is not possible to return 40 living hostages to Israel. Is the report true? And if so, why would Hamas say so?
So obviously I can't comment on those reports. I can only tell you that there are 133 families of hostages who wait every single moment for their loved ones to return home. You know, we are approaching the festival, the Jewish festival of Passover, which recognizes the freedom of the children of Israel from oppression. It's a festival of freedom. This would be the perfect time to get those people home. For 6 months, they have languished in the Hamas terror dungeons. An absolute travesty of justice, an absolute terrible, terrible war crime. They must come home, and they must come home now. And you can be sure that this government is razor focused on getting these people home as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. So our following, we've got one more question, I think.
Jim Williams, Zenger International News Service, Washington, D.C. Yesterday, Jake Sullivan told the press that there would be no Palestinian state without an agreement with Israel. Is that how the Prime Minister understands it?
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. I'm not sure I really understand your question. I've made my points about rewarding October the 7th with a Palestinian state. That would be obscene, absolutely obscene. The Prime Minister has made the government's view very, very clear, and that is Palestinians should be able to rule themselves without the power to harm us. That's been quite clear, and I think there's consensus across the country for that as well. But the idea of creating a terrorist state on our borders would be a disaster as things stand right now. So I think that was the last question. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll have another briefing at the same time tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was the very latest from the Israeli government, giving an update on the Israel-Hamas war, the very latest of the hostage situation. They also gave an update as far as those ceasefire talks underway out in Cairo, Egypt, now at 8:49 on the East Coast, giving you a live look out in Gaza. Well, from Gaza to Florida, we now transition to another top story we are following this morning, as too many people are ignoring warnings to get out of town when a hurricane is bearing down on Florida. Now, the Hurricane Center says it's changing things up to get more people out of harm's way. Fox 35 Orlando's Marley Capper joining us live from Volusia County. Marley, good morning to you. People living along the beach know all too well how unpredictable hurricanes can be. What's being done to combat this?
Good morning. It's always great to be with you. So there's a few things that are happening. First of all, let me address the room, right? It looks like we're in the Situation Room, but it's not. It's the Operation Room here at Emergency Management Services in Volusia County. And you're 100% right. There's people that live at the beach that have lived here for 20, 30 years, and they think, oh, I know this. I know how to do hurricanes. I know the protocol. I know the steps. But we're seeing worse and worse and stronger hurricane seasons. It doesn't start until June, but we're already seeing some predictions coming out that are, you know, cause for concern, right? We don't want to scare people, but we want people to be alert and be ready to go. That way, when hurricane season does come, people are prepared. So we're going to go over and meet one of our friends, and I want to take a look at the room and show you guys where we're at here in Volusia County. Very impressive facilities here, and come hurricane season, this room is packed, standing room only. Isn't that right? So I'm with Clint. Mika, you are the director here. Tell me how crazy this looks. It's empty and calm now, the calm before the storm, right? What does it normally look like?
So if we get into a situation where we need to activate, we can have over 100 people in this room that are subject matter experts in any of a number of various fields: law enforcement, fire, EMS, public works, liaisons from our various municipalities, all in here monitoring what is going on across our county as a storm approaches, for example, and coming up with tactics and strategies on how we're going to deal with that. Are we going to issue evacuation orders, that sort of thing?
Definitely. I mean, just like looking at all the little, what are these called, placards here, you can see here's the Coast Guard. Oops, I closed that there. And then here's over here Ponce Inlet. So there's all these Port Orange, all these cities, all these municipalities here that are prepared and have a seat at the table to make sure that those in their viewing areas are safe. So let's get into it. Obviously, the National Weather Service hasn't put out their predictions yet, but Colorado State has. Tell us about what we could be expecting for this upcoming hurricane season.
So the Colorado State prediction is telling us that we're looking at a busier than normal hurricane season. We could see up to 23 named storms, and 7 of those could be over Cat 3 category hurricanes. So it's busier than normal. So we're anticipating being busy this year. Now, that doesn't mean that all of those storms are coming our way, but it only takes one. So again, we're always encouraging people to be ready to do their part to help us help them.
Definitely. And again, it's not to scare people. We don't, but there is a cause for concern. So we want to make sure that people are ready. So there is a few ways that people can get involved. First, let's talk about the Hurricane Expo. So if you're in Florida, specifically Volusia County, tell me about the Hurricane Expo and what people can expect.
Of course. So we're doing our annual Hurricane Expo at the Volusia County Fairgrounds on May 4th from 10 to 2. People can drop by. There will be subject matter experts there to talk about insurance, preparedness, all of the various aspects. So we encourage everybody to stop by and visit us. There will be emergency vehicles there for people to see. So again, it should be a good time.
That's a perfect transition to my next question/topic. So a lot of people are moving from all over the country to Florida. It's rampant. We're seeing all these people that want to come enjoy the Sunshine State. But with that, people don't really know how a lot of the insurances, even for car insurance, it's completely different than other states. Yeah. Renter's insurance isn't enough to protect you from a hurricane.
Correct. Renter's insurance and homeowner's insurance. Most people think, well, I've got insurance, so I'm covered. Flood insurance is a component that sometimes people miss, and it's absolutely vital to have that coverage as well, because most homeowners insurance and most renters insurance won't cover flood damage. So from a storm surge or inundation from a rainstorm, that flood insurance becomes very, very critical. So that's a really important piece for people to have in their preparedness kits.
Clint, thank you for your expertise. So if you are in the area and you're concerned, or maybe you're like, I got this, no matter what you do, make sure that you are prepared. You can go over to Volusia County's website for alerts. They have an app. You can go to Fox 35 Weather app. You can go to Fox Weather's app. So many different resources for you to have to make sure that you're staying safe. But for now, we'll go ahead and send things over to you.
Marley Capper there with Fox 35 Orlando. Marley, truly amazing to see this. Many people see the storm and the aftermath, but they don't know all of the entities and partners working together behind the scenes to keep people safe. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox this morning. You be safe and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you so much. The time now 8:54 on the East Coast. Good morning to you. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Jeanne Francine here with you on this Tuesday morning. It is April 9th. We have to go to our final 2-minute commercial break of the hour. But when we come back, my colleague Josh Breslow taking over, continuing with those live events, top stories and headlines of your Tuesday. We'll be right back in just 2 quick minutes.
Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over in Pontiac, Michigan right now, as any moment we do expect the first parents ever charged and convicted for the actions of their child in a high school shooting will be sentenced. James and Jennifer Crumbley will be in the same courtroom for the first time since they were each convicted of involuntary manslaughter earlier this year in separate trials. Their son Ethan, who was 15 at the time, opened fire at Oxford High School back in November 2021, killing 4 students and wounding 7 other people. As we wait for all of this to get underway, I do want to bring in a guest here. Echo Yanka is a professor of law and philosophy at the University of Michigan and the Associate Dean for Faculty and Research. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, this is a case that so many people have been paying very close attention to nationwide. So can you break down for me the significance of this case itself and of the sentencing?
Sure. I mean, so the social part of the case is obvious in that it's another one of America's heartbreaking school shootings, another small town ripped apart, a town that's about an hour from where I sit now. And so that kind of pain is going to grab all our attention. On the legal side, we have a kind of clash of legal principles. In the very first few months of law school, you are taught that you are not responsible for other people's actions, even when those actions are sometimes quite predictably facilitated. So we teach these classic cases where somebody gives somebody who's upset or even suicidal a gun, and they use that weapon. And the law has typically said you're not responsible for those actions. But if you wanted to pick a test case that would test that intuition, you would pick a case like the Crumbley case, where parents who were painted as disinterested, more caring about their own affairs, literally their hobbies, and not hearing their son cry out for mental health help, bought him a gun days before Christmas, took him to a shooting range. And then on that last fatal day, they're called into school because he's drawing pictures of dead people on his homework. And they leave him at school and they don't tell the school officials that he has a gun. So all those facts led a prosecutor to finally say no more and gain two what are nearly unprecedented convictions for parents for an action that their son committed. And layered on top of all that, of course, is a lot of angst by parents that, you know, where will this end? At what point am I not responsible for my children's actions? It's that stew of social pain and legal intrigue that makes this case one that the whole world actually has been interested in.
And right now we are looking live inside that courtroom in Pontiac, Michigan. This is slated to begin any moment now. We know that these don't always start on time, but this is scheduled to take place at 9 a.m. Eastern time. We just hit that 9 o'clock hour. Does this case and whatever happens here really set a precedent?
Absolutely. I mean, so of course, its precedential value controls to some extent, or is most significant in its home jurisdiction, so in Michigan. But prosecutors use cases from all across the country. And so a prosecutor, knowing that this has pushed the law a little further, is going to be able to use this in the next suit, whether it be Michigan or a neighboring jurisdiction or perhaps anywhere in the country. And just as importantly, prosecutors are going to be able to use this in cases that don't garner nearly so much attention. So maybe it's going to be a quieter case where prosecutors use this as an analogy for somebody who uses a gun in another kind of crime, or maybe goes for a joyride, or most importantly, a prosecutor using this to demand that somebody plead guilty to a crime that never sees the drama of a courtroom or a jury. And so that's why some legal experts, myself included, always worry that when prosecutors have new tools, they will expand the reach of criminal law. And we need to think about that. It's in a case like this, I understand why we might want that, but we need to be thoughtful about whether or not we want to address social problems consistently with criminal law.
When the verdicts came down, and we're going in reverse a little bit here, but when those verdicts came down against Jennifer and James Crumbley, is that what you expected? Did you expect to see that guilty verdict for both the parents?
It's a great question. Her case, of course, was first. And as I said, look, if I was writing an exam to try to get you to answer for liability, I would have chosen facts like this, facts that are just absolutely devastating. You know, parents who walk out of school knowing that their child has a gun and is fixated on violence. And so in some sense, this is the case that was poised for this kind of ruling. But I have to admit, even though a part of me thought, of course I can see why she prosecuted, and of course I could see why a jury would convict, it's such a legal principle that you can't be responsible for somebody else's actions that when we finally got the conviction, a part of me went, wow.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, they were tried separately. It sounds like obviously sentencing is going to happen for both the parents today. What do we expect to happen? Are we going to hear from family members of victims? Could we possibly hear from both of the Crumbleys as well?
Well, the Crumleys, the prosecutors, and family members have been invited to write what we call impact statements. The family members write victim impact statements. And that's when they explain to the court kind of the special pain that they felt. I mean, while of course we all know, or we can imagine what it would be like horrifically to lose a child, victim impact statements give a family a moment to make that alive to a judge, to tell you what was special about this child or the way that your family has been individually ripped apart. And that's a very important and moving moment. The Crumleys, the prosecutors and the defense team have already submitted their memos asking for what they both think should occur. She asked for house imprisonment, oddly enough, to be imprisoned in the guest house of her defense lawyer as a way of serving out her sentence. And he, rather more ambitiously, asked to be held just to time served, and then some maximum, a few months of supervision afterwards. So his is a rather ambitious request to, you know, essentially denying that he should be punished anymore at all.
Do we expect that they will get the same sentence? As you mentioned, they each have kind of put forward what they expect. We know the prosecution has said they want 10 to 15 years. Is it likely that both of them actually get the same sentence here?
Well, the cases are obviously very similar. I mean, it's the same set of facts and the same crime. So, the natural instinct is to say that they'd be terrifically similar. That being said, their defenses were slightly different, and the claims about which one of them were more responsible, she claimed he was the one really in charge of the gun, in a sense. So that might be slightly different. There's also this complicating factor that James Crumbley, while he was in prison, on a few phone calls, either vented, depending if you're sort of sympathetic to him, was venting. If you're not sympathetic to him, he was communicating threats as against the judge. Now, in some sense, he's not standing trial for that, but those are factors that a judge could take into account in moving his punishment one way or the other. So you could imagine him being punished somewhat more for those actions. At the heart of it, the judge is supposed to take these separately, but these are similar cases, and I'll be interested in which factors lead her to punish one slightly differently than the other.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions about how this is going to play out today, as you mentioned there. I want to talk about the trials. Again, there were separate trials that were held. What stood out to you about those trials as you did watch them unfold?
So it was actually really interesting. They were meant to be tried together until the very last. Indeed, there was kind of some legal bluster from their defense team saying that, nothing's going to drive this family apart. These rumors that they want to be tried separately are nonsense. And then in terms of a trial, at nearly the 11th hour, they suddenly decided to be tried apart. And that told you that they were going to, in some sense, point the finger at each other, or at least that they thought they had importantly legally different defenses in the details. As for the actual trial, I think the thing that really jumps off the page was that she took the stand and he didn't. Hers was a kind of very aggressive defense in a legal posture. That is to say, her defense team bet the house on the legal principle. They really just leaned on the idea that no matter what somebody else did, you're not legally responsible. And I think that came to its most chilling moment when she was asked, if you could do anything different that day, what would you do? And her response was nothing. Right. I think that was really startling to the jury. But the move there, whether or not one agrees with it and whether or not one is in some sense really put off or horrified by it, the move there was to really claim, I didn't do anything wrong and I'm not responsible. And that's what they really bet on. Whereas in his defense, he did not take the stand, and they were, I think, hoping to cast him in a much more sympathetic and remorseful light.
And that's actually my next question, because we know that Jennifer Crumbley was tried first, and then you had James Crumbley tried. Jennifer testified, James did not. Did we expect that? What might be the reasoning behind all of that? You kind of touched on it, but I mean, why might he have chosen not to testify after she did?
Yeah, so when you go second, I mean, of course, look, I don't want to pretend that I'm in their meeting room, right? So, like anything, it's their meeting, it's their defense counsel, and these were hardworking, good faith defenses as well. But I think once they'd already seen the trial play out in her case and see what looked like a precedent-moving conviction, and frankly, see how unsympathetic she looked on the stand, it seemed to me they had very little to gain from putting him on the stand. Their actions afterwards could have been painted as fleeing. Anytime, in any case, you put somebody on the stand, you're opening them up to really important and frankly quite damaging cross-examination. They could open up cans of worms that you'd rather have closed. And after seeing her convicted, it wasn't clear, unless they really wanted him to come up there and just seem more sympathetic, what was to be gained by putting him on the stand.
We do know that we are going to hear, as you mentioned, those victim impact statements from the victims who survived, the families. They've all been invited there. Not sure how many of them will be speaking, but then there is the option for the Crumbleys to speak as well. Do you expect that they will? Do you think that we could actually hear from them? Obviously, we heard from Jennifer. We haven't heard from James.
Yeah, so I think I'm loath to guess exactly what they want to do here, but I do think what's interesting is in their memos following the conviction, you've seen a real reversal in the way that they attack this. So I guess it's not surprising, right? Remember, in the beginning, the legal defense was, we couldn't imagine this happening, and we're just not responsible. And so that reads as a bit cold, a bit I wouldn't change anything. It's not my fault. In the aftermath of a conviction, they've been much more willing to express remorse, sympathy, that they would change anything they could. Many more statements of how they've prayed for the victims, how they wish they could go back and do that day over again. And so if you wanted them to speak today, it would be in order to broadcast a much more remorseful position, hoping that that would affect the judge.
And again, I know you're not directly involved in the case. I'm more so asking this from your legal expertise here, but we are going to hear those victim impact statements. We could hear from the Crumbleys. Does any of that influence the judge's decision, or is it likely in this case the judge has already decided this is going to be the sentence for each of them?
I mean, judges are human too, but I suspect the judge already knows what she wants to see happen. Remember, even though these victim impact statements are really important moments, symbolic moments for the families to speak, and I don't say symbolic dismissively, symbols can be really important. The judges, there are two really, really critical notes here, right? This is an incredibly visible, incredibly painful crime. The judges deeply and intimately, as almost anybody in that community, is aware of these crimes. And so there's nothing surprising to be had, although it might be personalizing and moving. But secondly, the judge has seen many of these statements in memos, not necessarily all the victim impact statements. I know some of the victims were actually really wrestling with whether to say anything even to the last moment. But to put it a little quietly, I don't think, I think the judge may be deeply moved, but I don't think the judge will be taken by surprise by anything to be said today.
My last question for you here. We do know, of course, that we talked about precedent this sentence. What are the possible implications overall of this sentencing and how everything does play out?
Yeah, so, you know, I think the real message was in the conviction. I mean, that was the powerful message that sent shockwaves across the legal community, across the country, frankly. You know, I'll just say it honestly, I've been talking about this trial in Australia, in the Netherlands. I mean, this trial has gripped some part of the world's imagination. So I think the sentence really just puts the capstone on it. The only thing that the sentence could really change in my mind is if the judge gave a dramatically low sentence. If she shockingly did something like time served or even just a short time, that would make the conviction seem more symbolic than the serious hammer of the criminal law, but I don't expect her to do that.
All right, as you saw, James Crumbley just entering in. Now, do we know if they are going to be, I know that they're both being sentenced today. Do we know if they'll both be in the courtroom at the very same time here?
I've heard that this is the first time they'll be, I am only going from the reported statements, but I've heard this is the first time they're going to be in the same room together since quite some time. And so even if they're sentenced in seriatim, it might be, I mean, there's kind of an important moment here where they're once again standing next to each other as co-parents.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and break all of this down. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, I mean, look, I think this is a heartbreaking case. And if I'm perfectly honest, I don't know what I would have voted for if I were a juror. But I do worry that ultimately we'll be gripped by this instead of the underlying tragedy, which is to say, you know, ultimately the deep problem that we have with gun violence seems to me hardly addressed by hoping that we can hold parents and third parties liable for what their children do. And so I understand why prosecutors who are frustrated that they have no other help coming would do this, but I worry that this is hardly a solution to the heartbreaking problem.
Thank you so much again for taking the time here. And that answers our question, because we do have Jennifer Crumbley, who just walked in there, and we already have James Crumbley sitting down the first time that they have been in the same courtroom here. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, and I do want to zoom in to give you a better look right here over in Pontiac, Michigan. That is Jennifer Crumbley right there. And again, she is in the courtroom with her husband right there, James Crumbley, as both are expected to be sentenced here in a matter of minutes. They are sitting at the same table. Let's pop up the audio here to see if that audio feed has begun just yet. All right, so they are still getting settled in there. You can hear kind of the background noise in the court. We're going to keep listening in because the second that all of this gets underway, we do want to make sure we bring it to you here. But really, in a matter of minutes here, the first parents ever charged and convicted for the actions of their child in a high school shooting, they're going to be sentenced. James and Jennifer Crumbley, sitting at that same table there, are in the same courtroom for the first time since they were each convicted of involuntary manslaughter earlier this year in separate trials. Their son, Ethan, who was 15 at the time, opened fire at Oxford High School back in November of 2021, killing 4 students and wounding 7 others. Ethan Crumbley is currently serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, the prosecution is suggesting both get between 10 and 15 years after each being convicted of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. A big question, as we mentioned here, is whether both parents will receive the same sentence. They've been convicted of the same crimes, but other factors could also come into play. In that sentencing memo we were discussing, filed last week, the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office detailed alleged threats that James Crumbley made toward the prosecutor. Those could get him a longer sentence than his wife. That is always a possibility.